Now, let's assume that another species, whether humanoid or dolphin-like, could have existed millions of years ago. How do we find their traces? There was a Doctor Who episode about a non-human industrial civilization on Earth that existed long before us. These reptiles, called Silurians, were forced deep underground by a catastrophic rise of temperatures on Earth, and there they thrived for centuries. That inspired scientists to create the so-called Silurian Hypothesis. If there was an advanced civilization before us, we should find their traces somewhere. Well, let's try. Climatologist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank decided to dive into this themselves. Like us, any technologically advanced civilization would be hungry for energy, so they looked for global effects that would leave a widespread mark. For example, hints of large-scale industrial processes, like plants and factories, and their leftovers. Then comes the question of how long these civilizations would last. If they existed for a long time, we should look for long-lasting signs, like residues from burning fossil fuels, mass extinctions, synthetic chemicals not found in nature, and even traces of nuclear fission. Basically, we should search for the same kinds of things that humans are currently leaving behind as evidence of our activities. Unfortunately, this evidence isn't that easy to find. Let's imagine an unsettling scenario if humanity suddenly disappeared. Even though it seems like we've left a lot of changes on our planet, the future civilization millions of years from now would struggle to find any remnants of our existence. Why? Well, our planet has existed for 4.5 billion years. Complex life on Earth has existed for more than 400 million years. Compared to that, our industrial period only lasted around 300 years, and we haven't left any significant traces. Our record of Earth's history is full of gaps, especially the further back you look. The fossil record captures only some things, being very selective and incomplete. On average, one fossil emerges every 10,000 years, and dinosaur footprints are even rarer. Mountains rise, oceans change, and plate tectonics can easily wipe out evidence of entire civilizations. After a couple of million years, chances are any physical signs of a civilization would disappear. In order to find at least something, we have to look for things like odd sediment patterns or unusual isotopic ratios. Also, fossils mostly form in water, leaving us in the dark about creatures on land or in the jungles. So even if there was a technologically advanced society millions of years in the past, and even if they were far more advanced than us, we might struggle to find any clues of its existence. Frank and Schmidt try to understand how we could ever hope to spot signs of them. Discovering actual cities would be the ultimate proof of a Silurian-style civilization on Earth. But Adam Frank isn't too optimistic. Even now, our cities cover less than 3% at the surface, making it easy to miss ancient city ruins. Whether a city survives over tens of millions of years depends on whether the land around it is sinking, getting locked into a rock, or rising, getting worn away by rain and wind. So places like the French Quarter in New Orleans might have a better shot of making it into the geologic record than, say, Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. When it comes to finding artifacts, the odds are pretty slim as well. No prehistoric iPhone would survive millions of years, fancy glass or not. Finding their fossilized remnants might be a bit more promising, but it's still tricky. Considering modern humans have only been around for about 100,000 years, it's quite possible that we might overlook any traces of an earlier advanced species. There is one thing, though. We could stumble upon their traces in rocks. Our current chaotic era might leave a distinct mark on the Earth's geological history, especially since we're basically experiencing PTM 2.0. I'll get to that in a moment. So they try to look at the changes in the carbon cycle. Humans have been releasing a lot of fossil carbon since the 18th century. This leaves a special mark in the carbon isotope ratio, like a signature that shows the difference between carbon in living things, such as seashells, and carbon in lifeless volcanic rock. Scientists also look for signs in the way sediments are arranged. Large coastal deltas might mean that there were bigger rivers made by folks in this hypothetical civilization. Traces of nitrogen could suggest big-scale farming, where they used a lot of fertilizer. Spikes in metal levels in the sediment could mean runoff from heavy industries. Of course, a single find like that wouldn't tell us anything. Schmidt says the key is to look for multiple signs together. Without clear artifacts, the uniqueness of an event might show in various clues rather than a set of changes linked to a single cause. On a quest for Silurian-style clues, scientists even decided to check the Moon. Some astronomers find it surprising that no one has looked into this before. They even joked about the possibility of dinosaurs building rockets and leaving traces on the Moon or other celestial bodies. These astronomers think that Earth-like planets tend to erase signs of civilizations on their surfaces. So they're exploring the wild notion that these beings might have been space travelers. In that case, remnants of their technology, known as technosignatures, could be lurking not only on our Moon but also on asteroids, or even buried on Mars. There they might endure for millions or even billions of years. Unfortunately, so far, despite digging into the past 380 million years and examining all suspicious events, the researchers haven't found a clear match for a technological civilization. They don't give up, though. Frank calls for more investigation. For example, we could study how modern industrial chemicals stick around in ocean sediments. This, he believes, could help us identify similar chemical traces in the Earth's history. If there are no traces, why do we even bother to find something like that? This research is based on Schmidt and Frank's recent papers. They were delving into the Anthropocene. It's the proposed epoch, dominated by human activities on Earth. It's full of these things called hyperthermals. They're prehistoric events when temperatures on Earth sharply increased over a relatively short time. They're like extreme heat waves from the past. A great example of this is the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM for short. It happened around 55.5 million years ago and saw a rapid rise in global temperatures. Over 200,000 years, the average temperature on Earth jumped from about 9 to 14 degrees Fahrenheit. We study these hyperthermals to understand how they occurred, from natural causes or human activities. So, these hyperthermals sparked the genesis of Frank and Schmidt's research. To study them, scientists started examining chemical signals and tracers left in rocks. When doing that, Schmidt and Frank uncovered some eerie parallels between all the climate issues we have today and past periods of rapid temperature shifts. There's a close similarity between the PETM and other hyperthermal events. So all this work isn't just about solving a historical mystery. Understanding our impact on the environment can guide us to finding better ways to live in harmony with the planet and avoid becoming a forgotten species in the future. Our Milky Way is filled with lots of planets that could be just right for life, but we don't know if there are other civilizations out there. Earth is the only place we know of with living beings. About 200 years ago, people wondered if there might be civilizations on Mars. Back then, it was a real question. But once we got pictures from space probes, we decided there wasn't any evidence for it, and that idea got stuck in our minds. Now, it's not even considered a valid topic for serious science. It's seen as kind of silly. But no one has set clear limits on what could have happened on our own planet a really long time ago. So, even if there is no proof, we shouldn't throw away the possibility. Don't forget, it took humanity a while to recognize dinosaurs. Maybe Silurians are just patiently waiting for their time.
Here's a young man in a business suit. He's got a secret. He's in the bathroom, standing in front of the mirror, washing his face with cold water to cheer up. There's no one else here besides him, but he's not alone. The guy looks nervous. He slaps his cheeks, looks in the mirror, and says, "Don't worry, we can deal with it. We've been going to this for so long, we will win." He said "we," not because he has a split personality. And no, he's not talking to someone else through a small microphone. He said "we" because he knows a secret. Technically, he's not all human, but a group of billions of living creatures. Him, you, and all the people on Earth aren't really who they think they are. Only 43% of your body is made up of human cells. The remaining 57% are microbes and bacteria. Now this guy is going on stage to tell us this secret. Get on the scales. See the number? Now subtract a little more than half from it. This is your actual weight. Everything else is microscopic organisms. It's hard to believe because, in this case, your body should constantly change its shape, disintegrating into tiny particles. You would see your skin pulsating and continually moving. Fortunately, this doesn't happen for two reasons. Firstly, microbes are tiny. Their movements aren't visible. Secondly, most of this microbial world is in a dark place we can't see. A place without access to oxygen. In our intestines. It's where billions of little creatures are roaming. Feeling kinda crowded, huh? Some of them appeared before we were born, but most were colonists who came with food and water. On your body's surface, all microbes come from the environment. Every corner of your skin is covered with microbes. No matter how you try, it's impossible to get rid of them. There are more microbes than human cells. Our genome consists of about 20,000 genes. The number of microbes genes in the human body is about 2 to 20,000 million. That means that technically, we're not people, but microbes. Fortunately, it's not so bad. The genome of microbes complements our own. Such a model of existence reveals many opportunities for medicine. The human microbiome includes bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms, all of them divided into many species, and each type performs its own functions. Some microbes are responsible for vitamin extraction from food. Others help the breakdown of destructive substances. Another type helps your tummy digest food. A separate group regulates your immune system, protects it against ills, parasites, and viruses. Some control weight. Simply put, microbes make your life better, help your body function, and affect your health. There are microorganisms that provoke many diseases. They impair immunity or affect vital organs. Imagine you know exactly which bacteria are responsible for feeling unwell. Next, you find a way to rid yourself of them. It can be some pill with poison against those microbes. You drink it, and the cure erases all the harmful pests inside your body. A disease might appear because of the lack of beneficial microbes. This is one of the ways doctors heal many people in the world. Now let's say you've determined a group of microbes that help strengthen muscles. Then you find out which trace element helps these bacteria work faster and more efficiently. You add this vitamin to food or just get a pill containing 1 billion of these microbes. As a result, your muscles grow twice as fast. The presence of some microbes or the lack of others can show the state of your entire body. A sample of your microbes can indicate your level of health or the presence of some disease. Any person can improve their body not only with the help of genetic engineering, but with microbial medicine. Studying human microbes is cheaper, more efficient, and faster than expensive, complex gene modifications. This area is just beginning to develop all over the world, but there are already some discoveries. Previously, humanity thought microbes were enemies. We made up many ways to destroy bacteria and viruses. But along with the harmful germs, these cures get rid of the good ones. Now scientists understand that microbes can both take away and save lives. So they started large-scale research on this subject. Let's have a look at a big panda. This animal, with an ample supply of fat under its skin, is omnivorous. It rarely eats meat. Its diet mostly consists of berries and bamboo shoots. But in winter, there's none of this. So pandas feed on bamboo leaves. That food is low-calorie. There's almost no proteins in it. But still, pandas don't lose weight after a cold winter. Recently, scientists found out how pandas do that. It's all thanks to a unique microbiome. Every winter, a lot of unique bacteria are born in their intestines. These microbes extract and synthesize helpful substances from bamboo leaves better than others, and thus preserve the panda's weight. Scientists put these bacteria inside field mice. Small rodents began to gain weight much faster. Hamburgers, cakes, and other heavy foods contain calories and help develop colonies of microbes that contribute to weight. Millions of species of microbes have millions of functions. In theory, each of these functions can be used for the sake of humans. So, imagine you need to lose or gain weight, and you just add these microbes to your lunch. Do you want to sleep better or fight drowsiness? Drink microbes that will affect the production of sleep hormones. Do you want to strengthen the bone tissue? No problem! Bacteria are not only inside our bodies, they're everywhere. Part of the planet is made up of microbes. These tiny organisms are constantly multiplying. Look, there are 1 trillion of them on your keyboard. One bacterium increases in size and splits into 2 bacteria. After a few minutes, these 2 increase and divide again. 4 microorganisms appear. Each of them splits in 2. The colony of bacteria is rapidly growing. With such quick reproduction, one microbe can make 1 ton of offspring in just 24 hours. After 5 days, bacteria will fill all the seas and oceans. They will weigh more than the whole planet. Under ideal conditions, bacteria could take over the whole world. However, this will never happen. There are no such perfect conditions for uncontrolled bacterial growth. The speed they multiply at is equal to the speed of their destruction. Dryness, water, light, high temperature, gases, humidity, all these phenomena help control their population. At the same time, microbes are in charge of most of the chemical reactions on Earth. An old apple on the ground is rotting because of germs and bacteria. Mold forms on bread because of microorganisms. But they don't just exist and affect the condition of any material and other living creatures. An endless battle for survival continues in the world of microorganisms. Giant bacteria absorb smaller ones. Microbes with spikes defeat long microbes. There are also viruses that penetrate bacteria and infect them with their cells. A small ball with a virus can destroy an entire colony of microbes. Viruses multiply and take over more and more territories until they meet strong immune cells on their way. There are also creatures resembling robots. They look like diamonds with mechanical legs. Despite this unusual appearance, they're 100% natural. We call them bacteriophages. They have only one purpose: to destroy all bacteria. Bacteriophages are additional protection of the planet from uncontrolled reproduction of microbes. When some microorganisms multiply, they leave decay waste. This waste is harmful to humans. Bacteriophages fight these microbes and save our lives. The coolest thing is that these defenders don't seek to take over the planet. They only attack bacteria. Every second, billions of microbes battle with billions of bacteriophages on any surface. Sounds like a video game. The crystal-headed jumps on the bacterium and injects the genetic code inside it. This code has separate elements that connect to each other inside the microbe's body and becomes a new bacteriophage. Then it destroys the bacterium from the inside and goes for the next one. Look closely at your fingertip. There's a lot of life there. The strongest survive, the weak disappear. Wash it off, and new bacteria will come along with the water. Wipe your wet finger with a towel, and new germs will jump on you from there. And the battle will begin again. This is just the tip of your finger. Inside your body, some bacteria are fighting for your health against microbes that want to harm you. Some microbes in our intestine can be responsible for a good or bad mood. There are also parasitic bacteria that can affect our brain, the way we think, and our emotions. Some creatures control the behavior of animals and insects. Scientists constantly make discoveries in the world of microorganisms. So, bacteria are the rulers of our world. They appeared long before humans and the first animals, and most likely, they'll remain after us. Think about that. Dinosaurs are some of the most fascinating creatures to have ever walked Earth. It's a shame that we won't be able to have Jurassic Park, where we can see some of the coolest creatures come to life. But we are actually living with some creatures that are just as old as dinosaurs, such as crocodiles and sharks. They haven't changed much since they appeared millions of years ago. But most dinos didn't make it when the asteroid struck Earth. In a way, the asteroid was a giant reset button for the planet. After hitting Earth, this space traveler wiped out almost every living thing. The sky was covered with ash, which blocked out sun rays. That meant that plants couldn't grow, and this made a lot of herbivores, really hungry. As a result, they had to change their diet and adapt to the new changes. This forced some of those dinosaurs to take on a new path in life, turning into some modern animals we know today. If the asteroid had changed its course just a bit, then dinosaurs would have remained the dominant species. So, what would have happened if dinosaurs had stuck around? Well, first of all, evolution would have played out differently for them. Maybe during those millions of years,
humans would not have evolved to be on top of the food chain. Imagine a world where dinosaurs still existed today. If dinosaurs had evolved as humans did, then we'd have to compete with them. There were multiple species of humans, but Homo sapiens, also known as us, prevailed. A humanoid dino or dinoid would be something strange. First of all, they would look different, more reptilian than us. Our brain sizes would differ, and they would be physically bigger and stronger. Putting a human and a dinoid side by side would be interesting. First of all, dinoids would have scales as opposed to human skin, and their teeth would be sharper. They would probably not have 5 fingers on each hand, and their nails would be sharp claws. Also, we don't know what they would sound like, but they'd possibly be guttural like crocodiles. Dinosaurs had very good vision compared to mammals, so it's possible we'd see dinoids with large eyes. The population of Earth has reached a staggering 8 billion people, and we've changed our environment to suit our needs. With that said, if dinoids were the dominant creatures, then the environment would be suited for them. Speaking of physical features, scientists predicted what dinoids would look like if they had evolved into intelligent creatures that walked upright and had opposable thumbs. These wiggly thumbs are important for evolution, since they helped humans start using tools for defending themselves and hunting. The creature may not look like the ideal reptile, and its appearance might not be flattering. But if dinosaurs had evolved, then these creatures could be your classmate or colleague at work. Not all dinosaurs were alike, as their fossils have shown. Some were gigantic, while others resembled any modern-day animal. The biggest land-walking dinosaur was the Titanosaur, although the measurements are only rough estimates based on fossilized bones. It's estimated that the dino was around 122 feet long and lived between 100 to 95 million years ago. It was so massive that its weight was equivalent to 18 modern-day elephants. There were dinosaurs all over the world in different time eras, climates, and landscapes. However, only a handful were known as giants. But though they excelled in body size, they lacked in brain size. Some of the most well-known dinosaurs, like the Allosaurus and Stegosaurus, had very small brains, like me, which means it would have been nearly impossible for them to properly evolve into intelligent beings. Tell me about it. But in the late Cretaceous period, the T-Rex roamed the land. It had larger brains than its Allosaurus counterparts, which were millions of years behind. Even so, the T-Rex's brain only weighed just under a pound. A human brain is nearly 3 pounds. It might have been cool to see a T-Rex evolve into an intelligent being with opposable thumbs on its tiny stick hands. Contrary to popular belief, the T-Rex was actually quite slow, and a human could have easily outrun it. So, we know that these days, they wouldn't belong in any competitive sports that involve running. We know that dinosaurs could be herbivores and carnivores. But throughout their evolution, one thing remained the same: they had small brains. Other forms of dinosaurs were around too, such as long-legged and horned dinosaurs. Either way, they were on top of the food chain even when little mammals had cameo appearances. We have to consider that when the asteroid struck and wiped out dinosaurs, mammals took over the scene. If dinosaurs and mammals had shared the dominant position in the food chain and had followed a similar path in their evolution, then today's reality would be completely different than what we have now. Dinosaurs would have bigger brains and would compete with humans for the title of the smartest creature. One of the reasons why humans and parrots can talk is because of the strength and shape of our tongues. The evolved dinosaurs would have a different skull, shaped to fit such a tongue if they wanted to talk like humans. One of the reasons why humans made it to where we are now is because we evolved to stand upright to detect predators. This was one challenge we had to overcome in order to survive. But what would dinosaurs need to challenge if they were already the most dominant creatures? Some of the big-brained dinosaurs had long legs, which means they could run fast, detect predators, and grab food that otherwise would be beyond their reach. Their evolutionary path would be very different from that of humans, and maybe even more advanced. Their brains could have evolved into something impressive. They could turn out smarter than us and possess quicker reflexes. Imagine dinosaurs discovering gravity instead of Isaac Newton, or a dinosaur writing plays and poems better than William Shakespeare. Imagine dinosaurs possessing the creative knowledge to produce some of the finest art in history. Music and cinema would revolve around dinosaur culture, and fashion would look otherworldly. We would live in peace with dinoids, but we would certainly compete with them. The World Cup would feature dinosaurs and humans playing for their national teams, but clubs would be exclusively human or dinosaur. Some professions would be dominated solely by one species, and more physically demanding jobs would be taken by dinosaurs, like laborers and security guards. Eventually, dinosaurs would take over the world since they would be physically stronger than humans and would have better advantages than us. Humans, on the other hand, would need to figure out a way to keep up with dinosaurs. Mammals had a different path of evolution, where they never became gigantic super beasts as dinosaurs did. Instead, their brains developed and grew big. But even though humans are the smartest creatures on the planet, we don't have the biggest brain. Animals like orcas, whales, elephants, and other apes have bigger brains here. So why are we smarter than them? The answer is we don't know. The brain is the most complex organ we have, and we know so little about it. We don't even know exactly why it's so complex or why it behaves like that. Today's dinosaur descendants, like crows and parrots, have complex brains, which allows them to communicate, use tools, and even count. Bigger doesn't always mean better in this case. A parrot's brain is smaller than a cat's, but it's far more complex and intelligent than that of any feline out there. Some scientists argue that dinosaurs from the movies aren't 100% accurate, and that they used to have feathers. In terms of evolution, some small feathered dinos might have followed the path of primates. They might have evolved into a tree-dwelling primate that may also have followed the path of becoming another species of human.
Strange and amazing items are discovered often, but figuring out what our ancestors were up to is pretty tough. Especially when all you have are just some rusty cups and cave drawings. It's no surprise that even the experts in lab coats sometimes make mistakes. But it's not just about dusty plates and huge stones. Sometimes there's even humans with large heads. So grab your digging tools and let's travel back to ancient times to explore incredible societies that even scientists can't fully explain. Sardinia may look idyllic now, but I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't fancy visiting it 3,000 years ago. Rumor has it, terrible giants roamed around this island back then. People even talk about finding human skeletons over 13 feet tall there, although nobody's ever shown anything to prove it. But the stories will make you wonder because some weird stuff has definitely happened. In 1974, over 5,000 pieces of broken stone artifacts were found in a part of the island called Monte Prama, but instead of being displayed in a museum, they were locked up in an underground vault for about 30 years. Sounds a bit suspicious, doesn't it? When they were finally displaced in 2005, scientists put the pieces together to find statues of 38 giant men standing 8 feet tall. Not quite as tall as the legendary skeletons, but still pretty huge. It's thought these statues were made by the Nuragic people, who lived on the island a long time ago. Besides giant statues, they also built over 8,000 massive stone buildings. Perhaps Nuragic weren't giants themselves, but they definitely liked their things big. I do too. I like a big number of likes on our videos. That would be pretty great. Thank you if you liked this and subscribed. Now back to the video. You and I are pretty smart, but we might not be the smartest humans ever. Actually, we might not even be the smartest species. Since 1913, some skull fossils found in South Africa have hinted at a possibly smarter contender called Boscop man. This human-like species might have lived as recently as 10,000 years ago. Their skull suggests they had really big heads, which means their brains could have been 30% bigger than ours. Wow! Their average IQ could have been around 149, making them among the smartest 0.05% of people today. But if a Boscop brainiac was so much smarter, Why are they not around and we are? Well, bigger isn't always better, you know. Our brains are a lot bigger than our ape relatives, mainly in the prefrontal cortex. This part helps with high-level tasks like making decisions, remembering things short-term, and being aware of ourselves. The parts of the brain that handle our senses and movements haven't really grown much. So, maybe the Boscop spent too much time dwelling on the past rather than doing practical things like hunting. But this is all just guessing. We really don't know what happened to these clever cousins of ours. Some people even argue that Boscops weren't any different from us, with the only evidence being parts of skulls. The jungle is huge. Did you know the Amazon rainforest is home to about 30% of all the world's plant and animal species? That's impressive. However, the history of one native species, humans, has long puzzled scientists. The mysterious Khmer people lived here for hundreds of years and then vanished around 1400 AD. People thought the Amazon only had a few scattered tribes, but recently we discovered big, unusual shapes in the ground called geoglyphs. These might look like simple shallow ditches, but they're actually the remains of a vast civilization that spread over 5,000 square miles and includes about 450 markings, some as wide as 1,300 feet. That's insane! They likely contained ceremonial buildings and could have hosted up to 1 million people as recently as 550 years ago. Thanks to new technology like LiDAR, which uses a safe laser to map the forest without harming it, we can explore deeper. In 2019, some scans showed miles of raised roads and pathways and even pyramids over 70 feet tall. They found 26 separate settlements, 2 of which were at least 250 acres each. Damn, that's like 330 soccer fields. It's not certain what happened to the Khmer people. Maybe European conquistadors drove them out. Maybe the most baffling ancient civilization is one we've never actually found a trace of. Yep, I'm talking about Atlantis, the grand city that supposedly sank into the ocean. The first mentions of Atlantis come from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who talked about a great city near the Strait of Gibraltar. But for ages, everyone just thought Plato made up Atlantis as a perfect version of his own Athens. So why, about 12,000 years after it supposedly vanished, do we still wonder if it might be real? Well, in the 19th century, U.S. Congressman Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book giving 13 reasons why he thought Atlantis was more than just a myth. Then, in 1965, some folks thought they actually found Atlantis when they discovered the Richat structure, a massive 25-mile-wide dome in Mauritania, Africa. It's so big that you can see the whole thing from space. 2 astronauts flying over the Sahara Desert spotted this giant eye staring back at them and thought they'd made the discovery of a lifetime. Unfortunately, there's no solid evidence linking this structure to Atlantis. It's believed to have formed from volcanic activity about 100 million years ago. But it does look suspicious, doesn't it? Still, we're no closer to knowing the truth. Imagine going back to about 3,300 BCE and finding yourself in South Asia. Welcome to the Harappan civilization. These people were way ahead of their time. They had cities like Harappa and Mohenjo Daro, complete with baked brick houses, sophisticated drainage systems, and even public baths. This place might have had over 5 million people, making it one of the densest regions at the time. They also invented a system of standardized weights that was incredibly useful for traders. And trading they did. These people had connections stretching all the way to the Middle East, thanks to their great skills in metallurgy. They even had a form of ancient branding. The seals were used to stamp clay on tray goods. Despite being so advanced with a thriving urban life, there's a whole bunch of mystery shrouding their language and script. We've got bits and pieces of their writing, but no one's deciphered them yet, even with all the technology we have today. We also still don't know how exactly their society worked. It looks like they didn't flaunt their social status as much as other civilizations. No grand palaces or massive monuments. Instead, their largest buildings might have been granaries. They sure were practical. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Around 1800 BCE, this bustling civilization started to decline, possibly due to shifts in river patterns. As the environment changed, the Harappans packed up, moving towards more hospitable lands. Ever heard of the Minotaur? The beast with a bull's head and a man's body, hunting the bravest travelers in a massive maze. Well, this wasn't just any old tale. It was one of the most popular dramas of the ancient world, and it was inspired by this place, the island of Crete. The Minoans lived here during the Bronze Age. They had stunning palaces, amazing frescoes, and a culture so rich it still fascinates historians to this day. They built places like Knossos, which was so complex with its multi-story buildings and elaborate hallways that it might have inspired the whole labyrinth myth. Their engineering was so ahead of its time that even their drainage systems were more advanced than what many of us have today. Let me know in the comments which of these stories you find the most fascinating, and thanks for watching. Statistically, 3% of in-hospital amputations performed by skilled surgeons end up in amputation of the wrong limb. But that's what happens in the human world. Ants somehow manage to do that right even without attending a medical school. Researchers have recently made a groundbreaking discovery regarding the medical capabilities of Florida carpenter ants. They saw those ants perform amputations on their injured colony members, marking the first known instance of such behavior in the animal kingdom. The study found that ants triage wounds and adapt treatments by amputating legs depending on the severity of the injury. The ants in question engage in these amputation procedures after sustaining injuries in battles with neighboring ant colonies. According to specialists, the ants are able to correctly diagnose wounds and decide whether amputation is necessary for survival. Injured ants willingly participate in the process, demonstrating a unique form of cooperation within the ant colony. While the exact reasons behind this behavior remain unclear, researchers speculate that ants that undergo amputations have a higher chance of survival compared to those with untreated injuries. The study also revealed that additional species of carpenter ants may exhibit similar amputation behavior, indicating that this medical treatment might be more widespread in the ant world than previously thought. Scientists hope to further explore the implications of these findings, including the ants' ability to feel physical discomfort and other strategies they may have for treating injuries. If there are ant surgeons, there must be ant nurses too, right? Well, Matabele ants are like the nurses of the insect world, rescuing and healing their wounded buddies after battles with termites. These ants are native to Africa and aren't afraid to take on biting soldier termites in their quest for food. These ants carry their injured comrades back home after raids, but rescues don't stop there. Once back at the nest, ants take turns caring for the wounded, using their mandibles and front legs to hold the injured limb in place and lick the wound for up to 4 minutes at a time. The ants don't just help their friends out of the goodness of their hearts. It turns out that these rescues are essential for the injured ant's survival, with up to 80% passing away within 24 hours if left untreated. Researchers found that the licking behavior might help prevent infections and improve the chances of survival. While humans can't walk more than a couple of blocks without consulting Google Maps, ants use the sun's position and visual memories of their surroundings to guide them home while walking backward with heavy loads of food. Research reveals that ants are not only skilled navigators, but also masters of adapting to their surroundings in creative ways. Previously believed to have 2 separate reflexes guiding their movements, ants have now been shown to strategically look behind them and use the sun's position to set their course while walking backwards. Basically, it's like ants have their own GPS system, which is impressive considering their small brains. Yep, size doesn't matter when it comes to intelligence. On another note, trapjaw ants have been found to have a surprising trick up their sleeves when facing predators. These quick and fierce ants can actually propel themselves into the air using their powerful mandibles to escape threats. Researchers observed this behavior in trapjaw ants encountering pit-building antlions and found that this unique escape mechanism significantly increased their chances of survival. The friendship between ants and aphids has been a topic of fascination for scientists for ages. Despite being as different as night and day, these two insects have joined forces to ensure their mutual success, like the ultimate dynamic duo in the bug world. Their partnership demonstrates mutualism, a fancy word for a give-and-take relationship where everyone wins. Ants play bodyguard for aphids, keeping them safe from pesky predators and parasites, while also making sure they never go hungry. In return, aphids whip up some delicious honeydew for ants to enjoy, kind of like a bug potluck. One of the perks of being pals with an ant is having a personal security detail on standby 24/7. Using their impressive jaws, ants scare off any troublemakers trying to mess with their aphid buddies. Some ant species even go above and beyond by taking aphids under their wings, well, legs, and moving them to safer locations. Aphids may not have the best taste in plant meals, but they sure know how to turn it into a yummy treat for their ant friends. By turning plant sugars into honeydew, aphids provide ants with a tasty snack packed with all the energy they need to keep on trucking. Ants will go to great lengths to find their aphid buddies and stock up on this sweet sustenance. Ants and aphids aren't just munching on snacks together, they're master communicators too. Using special chemical signals, ants guide one another to food sources and warn of incoming threats. They even exchange signals with their aphid pals, sometimes giving them a little tickle with their antennae to boost honeydew production. Aphids aren't just sitting back and soaking up the sun, they're proactive members of this bug buddy system. They listen to ants' signals and adjust their feeding habits accordingly, maybe even packing up and moving if ants say it's time for a change of scenery. Ants may not produce honeydew like aphids do, but despite being insects, they can produce milk like all the mammals out there. Who knows, maybe one day we'll get ant milk lattes at Starbucks. Just kidding. So, most researchers thought they knew just about everything there was to know about ants until they decided to take a closer look at their pupae. Scientists have observed ant colonies for over a century, amazed by how ants work together like one big superorganism. But despite all the attention on ants' busy activities, researchers haven't really focused on the pupal stage. This is when ants transform from larvae into full-grown adults. In a recent study, scientists revealed that ant pupae play a crucial role in colonies by producing a milk-like substance that feeds the rest of the ants. This discovery was surprising because milk-like secretions were found in at least one species from each of the 5 major ant subfamilies. So, this amazing find suggests that there may be many more ant species out there making their own milk. And the milk-making process might have originated early in the evolution of all ants. Trust me, you don't want to be on bad terms with ants, or else they might adorn their houses with your head. I know, it sounds insane, but here's the deal. Ants really use their foes' heads to decorate their homes. For the past 60 years, scientists have been puzzled by the behavior of a small ant called Formica arcboldi. These guys love to adorn their nests with the skulls of trapjaw ants, which are armed to the teeth with venomous stingers and massive, snapping mandibles. Despite the odds, Formica arcboldi ants in Florida are skilled at bringing down their larger adversaries and snagging their heads. How do they manage to do it, you ask? Well, it's all about their quick and efficient acid spray. Turns out, Formica arcboldi ants seem to have a taste for a few specific kinds of trapjaw ants. By mimicking their prey's scent, these headhunters have found a clever way to overpower them in battle, But why exactly do they collect their foes' skulls? Some experts think it could be a way to mask themselves from kidnapper ants who brainwash entire ant colonies. Tiny weaver ants have impressive nest-building skills and can create nests that are 1,000 times bigger than themselves. They create their dwellings by carefully pulling tree leaves together and securing them with silk produced by their larvae. To start their construction project, ants pick out a tree branch that will work well for their nest. Then they gather around leaves and begin pulling them together until they can form a solid structure. Once the leaves are in place, it's time for weaver ant larvae to shine. Adult ants carefully transport the larvae to spaces between the leaves, where they use their silk-producing abilities to glue everything together. Tartesos, a mysterious, highly developed society that once flourished and then, without any warning, suddenly disappeared. Moreover, before they were completely gone, they performed some strange rituals, as if they were trying to save themselves from something. But what happened to these people? Let's try to find out. Let's go to the southwest of Spain, to about 2,500 years ago. Once, there was a beautiful city here, a trade center of Tartesos. Imagine the temple in the middle of a deserted town. A breathtaking, monumental 2-story building. There's a thick smell of frying meat in the air, and the smoke from its frying rises high into the sky, covering the patterns of the sanctuary. The sun has already set, and it's time to prepare for the ritual. We enter the ancient monumental hall. Inside, hundreds of people gather around a long wooden table lined with delicate ceramics and bronze bowls. They feast and drink. These people have much more fun than the animals outside the building. These animals are being prepared for the ritual. Horses, cows, pigs, donkeys, even dogs. All of them were brought here to appease the deities. And what happens after the ritual itself is even crazier. At the end of the ceremony, people take torches and set fire to the whole building. Everything turns to ashes and coals, and when the last embers fade away, they take shovels and begin to bury this place. It will take them at least several days to bury the former sanctuary under piles of earth. They work tirelessly. In some places, the thickness of the layers of mud and clay will reach almost 14 feet. And then, these people, the last known Tartessians, just leave this place and disappear from our world forever. But what just happened? Why did they even do all this? Let's start from the beginning. Tartesos was first mentioned in Greek and Roman texts thousands of years ago, but for a long time, we had no idea what it even was. All the descriptions were contradictory and confusing. Some archaeologists thought that Tartesos was a kind of seaport. Others thought that it was a river or a water reservoir. They even said this place could be connected with the mystical Atlantis. But there was nothing to back it up with, so the scientific community quickly rejected this idea. But today, we know the truth. Tartesos was an ancient civilization. It's been located on the Iberian Peninsula, one of the southernmost islands of Europe. It flourished in the 9th to 5th centuries BC, and then, around 2,500 years ago, suddenly disappeared. They were quite rich. The island had rich reserves of metal, so their economy was thriving. Silver, copper, lead, and other good things were mined in the local Sierra Morena mountains. Almost all the locals were engaged in trade. For them, it was a common thing. Isn't that strange that there were so few records left about them? And not so many monuments of their culture have survived to this day. In total, throughout Spain, scientists were able to collect around 20 archaeological finds related to Tartesos. 3 of them were excavated in the Guadiana Valley: Cancho Roano, Casas del Turnuelo, and La Mata. Let's start with the first one. Cancho Roano was discovered in 1978. This find was one of the most significant pieces of the puzzle. This is one of the most beautifully preserved structures of the Tartessian civilization. Not only the walls have survived to this day, but so did the altar, the moat, and even several artifacts. For example, some jewelry and wine glasses. It was a square building surrounded by a deep moat filled with water. And, to be honest, we still don't know its exact purpose. We only assume that it could be an ancient temple. Some rituals were carried out there. For instance, they would set fire to the temple and cover it with thick layers of sand and clay. They even left some expensive artifacts inside, tools, gold jewelry, and so on. Moving on to the next find. Casas del Turruñuelo is one of the best preserved buildings in the entire Western Mediterranean. We only discovered it a couple of years ago, back in 2015. And it hasn't been studied that well yet. But we already know that this place is also pretty weird. Casas del Turruñuelo was a very rich building. It wasn't just some kind of temporary camp. It was a place of monumental, impressive architecture. Massive staircases, vaulted ceilings, luxurious materials brought from all over the Mediterranean, and the latest construction technologies. It was supposed to be a place of power, maybe even something like a palace. And yep, it also became the venue for the rituals. It's unclear whether the locals intended to destroy this beautiful place from the very beginning, but this is where they performed the greatest ritual in the area. This ritual involved more than 50 animals, including the most valuable ones, horses. It was their only means of transportation. The fact that these people gave away their horses may indicate that they planned to stay here for some time. Perhaps they hoped to appease the deities and settle on local lands. The ritual was carried out exactly as they intended. And just like Cancho Ruano, this place was also set on fire. When the ritual ended, the locals buried this place and left, disappearing into the countryside of the Iberian Peninsula. Now it's an abandoned and quiet place. Just like Cancho Ruano, it's been standing here untouched for more than 2,000 years. The last find is La Mata, which was discovered much earlier than the other two, back in 1930. The resemblance between all of them was striking. La Mata had the same fate. It was burned and forgotten for centuries. All of this is very strange and mysterious. It seems like the locals were fleeing from something. Perhaps something happened that made them start building these banquet halls and arranging large-scale rituals. They thought that their deities turned away from them and tried to appease them. But unfortunately, it didn't work. As a result, they were forced to leave their temples and soon disappeared altogether forever. And by the way, why did they disappear at all? Well, this is another mystery of this civilization. One of the most important questions is, did they know that they were going to disappear? Or was it something unexpected? Did they suffer some kind of sudden catastrophe from which they were trying to escape? Or something else? Scientists have several theories on this. The first theory says that there may have been several major earthquakes and subsequent tsunamis in this region. These natural disasters destroyed local settlements and severely demoralized the survivors. Perhaps they were looking for salvation from this. Another theory is that there were some problems with trading. Since they were rich in metal and lived off their economy, any problems in it could lead to big troubles. If they had some kind of mining crisis, then relations between different nations could worsen greatly, and things could get pretty nasty. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. The most current theory says that around the 6th century BC, a large-scale tsunami hit the port. This greatly damaged the economy, which worsened the relationship between Tartesos and its neighbors. In any case, this seems to be speculation. This place is like a dream come true for archaeologists. It stores a huge amount of information and secrets that we have yet to unravel. The Tartessians had no idea that by burying their artifacts, they were making a real gift to the scientists of the future. And while scientists continue to study them, we can check out the stuff they have already discovered. History lovers can see Tartessian tools, horse figurines, and decorated ivory in the Archaeological Museum of Badajoz. Let's hope that in the future, scientists will learn more interesting things about this civilization, and we'll finally find out what happened to them. This is Jeff, a typical American man, and his body count is 7. Or at least he claims it's so. And this is Julius, a not-so-typical Roman man, and his body count looks more like a phone number. He had loyal and unfaithful wives, multiple love affairs, and he was even intimate with someone who contributed to his demise. Since one of his lovers gave birth to the man who took his life, let's take a sneak peek at Caesar's bedroom, shall we? One important thing you need to understand is that Caesar wasn't born an emperor. There weren't any in his bloodline, and usually you need your daddy to reign the empire to be able to take over when you grow up. Duh, he had an ancient pedigree and all. His father was a senator, but his family wasn't that politically influential. So, his first wife was Cornelia, a noblewoman from a really good family. Together, they had Julia, who is the only legitimate daughter of Caesar, and no one can really tell how many non-legitimate ones he had. The big question is, was Caesar a good, loving, and loyal husband to Cornelia? Well, to know that for sure, we'd need a Ouija board, since there's no real evidence about their feelings documented in the books. But there's no evidence concerning why he refused to divorce her either, though he was literally forced to. Here's the tea. Back in 82-81 BCE, there was Lucius Cornelius Sulla, a Roman general who turned dictator. He was even the rival of Cornelius' dad, and he was forcing people to leave their wives and marry into his family. And guess what? Many people did comply. Sulla wanted Caesar to dump his wife Cornelia, but instead, Caesar chose to flee Rome. Because of that, he lost his titles and inheritance, and Sulla even hired people to liquidate him. Although he was caught, he managed to bribe his captor and, with some help from influential allies, returned to Cornelia. Who knows, he may have stayed with her happily ever after, but she passed away pretty young in 69 BCE. Let's sum up. This marriage made him lose money, home, position in society, and he could even lose his life. Yet it was her untimely demise that did them part. Maybe Caesar did really love Cornelia after all. Anyways, 2 years later, Caesar officially remarried. In a way, that was Sulla's dream coming true. Caesar married someone from his family because Pompeia was his granddaughter. Needless to say, it was more of a marriage of convenience rather than a marriage for love. Time went by, and 4 years later, Caesar got a serious promotion, becoming in 69 BCE the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of the Roman state religion. It all came with an official residence on the Via Sacra, and you can still take a walk down this street if you visit the Roman Forum. Things seemed to be going pretty smoothly until one day in 62 BCE, when his wife Pompeia decided to throw a party that put an end to her marriage. She hosted a festival called Bona Dea, and there was only one condition: no man was allowed. However, a young patrician managed to sneak in because he was disguised as a woman, apparently for the purpose of seducing Pompeia. He was caught and prosecuted for sacrilege, and at that time, rumors about adulterous Pompeia started circulating around Rome. It turned out pretty fine for Clodius. He was free from any criminal charges, as Caesar gave no evidence against him at his trial. Things ended less happily for Pompeia as Caesar divorced her. Ever heard the proverb, "Caesar's wife must be above suspicion"? Well, that's about this very unfortunate situation. We'll never know if Pompeia was really unfaithful, but Caesar didn't want to take a risk, though it could have been just a lame excuse to ditch Pompeia, who he may have never really loved. The same year Caesar divorced Pompeia, he married another woman, Calpurnia, a humble young lady of noble descent. We already know that he was becoming more and more influential in Rome, and he needed to think about what was the best for his career. Despite being just a convenience wife, Records say that Calpurnia was a good and faithful one to Caesar, which can't be exactly said about him. He had numerous lovers, and the most famous of them was, surely, Queen Cleopatra. But we'll speak about their spicy affair a bit later. That was a very much unequal marriage, starting with the fact that Calpurnia was 17 and Caesar was 41 when the two wedded. Get this, she was probably younger than Caesar's daughter. Yet it's not something unbelievable in the 21st century. Duh. It's hard to judge whether Calpurnia was gifted by nature with an outstanding appearance, yet what she was definitely gifted with was patience. Otherwise, it's impossible to explain how she tolerated the Casanova lifestyle Caesar adopted in the years of their marriage. Rumor had it that he took advantage of the wives of a number of prominent men. He also seduced the wives of two of his allies in the First Triumvirate, a political alliance among three prominent politicians. One of them was Caesar himself. Do the math, and you'll see that no wife of his allies hadn't been seduced. Weird, right? There weren't records of him being this adulterous before, but after a marriage where he thought he was cheated on, he just went nuts and started treating women like Kleenex. All Rome was buzzing about his relationship with Servilia, who was a Roman matron. No one knows when their relationship started exactly. Some records say it was 59 BCE, but Plutarch insisted it all started way back when they were teenagers. And if Plutarch was right, then the rumor about Caesar being the real father of Brutus, yep, the one who betrayed him and one of those who took his life, might be true after all. Caesar definitely had a thing for taken ladies. Like, Caesar also had love affairs with the Mauritanian queen, but it wasn't as memorable as his affair with the one and only Cleopatra. When Caesar met her, he was in his 50s and had a wife back in Rome. But something about the 21-year-old Cleopatra caught his eye. I guess it was her charm and intelligence. The drama kicked off when Julius Caesar got involved in her family feud with her brother, Ptolemy XIII, whom she was married to at the time. Their relationship was rocky, leading to Cleopatra being kicked out of Egypt while Ptolemy tried to rule alone. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria, he was greeted with the severed head of his rival, Pompey. Outraged, he wanted Cleopatra and Ptolemy to reconcile, but Cleopatra had other plans. She famously snuck into the palace, hidden in a bed sack, to charm Caesar. Their connection was both romantic and politically strategic. Caesar eventually put Cleopatra back on the throne, arranging for her to marry her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, after her first brother husband drowned. Despite the awkward situation, Cleopatra took charge of the kingdom. They celebrated their alliance with a lavish cruise down the Nile, during which Cleopatra announced her pregnancy with Caesar's son, nicknamed Caesarion. He was never acknowledged by Roman law, though. Even though their situationship faced challenges due to Roman laws and Caesar's existing marriage, Cleopatra spent about 18 months in Rome. The official wife, Calpurnia, didn't magically disappear. She was always there and loved him, turning a blind eye on all the shame he put on her. The night before Caesar's life was taken, Calpurnia had a nightmare where she saw Caesar hurt and breathing his last in her arms. The next morning, she pleaded with him not to go to the Senate as he had planned. Her worries really got to him and he decided to stay home. But then, Brutus showed up in his house and convinced him to brush off the bad signs and head to the Senate anyway. The rest is history. After Caesar was eliminated, Cleopatra didn't think long and returned to Egypt, only to begin an affair with Mark Antony, Caesar's ally. And Calpurnia? She handed all the Caesar's papers to the same Mark Antony and grieved her late husband, surrounded by her servants.
Imagine you get to be an archaeologist for the day. You'll travel the world to solve the mystery of long-lost civilizations that disappeared without a trace. Grab your chisel and fedora, and let's go. You arrive at the American Southwest, where an ancient mystery is waiting to be solved. You make your way to Chaco Canyon, just outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's hot and dry in this deserted area. You're here to visit the ancient ruins of the Anasazi people. It's said that they were a thriving civilization that met a mysterious end. You hike a few miles before you begin to make out the shape of dwellings, constructions built of stone in the middle of the canyon. This is Pueblo Bonito, a 10th century complex that contains as many as 800 rooms and stands over 5 stories tall. The buildings are beautiful and made from sandstone. To access the complex, its inhabitants built a 400-mile network of roads, some of them 30 feet wide. You can't wrap your head around the fact that it was built so long ago. Everything looks so well preserved. The Anasazi reigned over the so-called Four Corners region from 100 CE to around 1600 CE. During this time, they built a civilization that sprawled over 30,000 square miles, including Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona. Standing inside a huge kiva, an underground ceremonial chamber, you wonder what happened to the Anasazi people. Scientists have analyzed tree rings and found out that the Anasazi population lived through a period of great drought. The drought is believed to have lasted 23 years, and there was possibly no rain at all during this time. This definitely affected their livelihood, from malnutrition to battles over food and resources. But was it enough to make 30,000 people flee their homes? Researchers say these people left their homes with their belongings still in place. Ladles were left in ceramic bowls. Granaries were full of supplies. It was as if they intended to return, but never had the chance to come back. For many years, archaeologists have believed that the drought was the reason for the disappearance of this thriving society. But there's other evidence that shows a different story. Anthropologists say that the ancestral Puebloans, as they are also called, were an exemplary population. They were peaceful and lived together in harmony. But that's not what their architecture shows. They isolated themselves from the rest of the world by building their settlements so high on top of cliffs. And they built walls and other security structures in order to protect themselves. What were they so afraid of? Recently, archaeologists began to study bone fossils of the ancestral Puebloans, and they found evidence that suggests that toward the end of their civilization, things might have gotten pretty bad. Evidence shows that local leaders were ruling using fear-based methods. Severe punishment started to be inflicted on those who did not follow their strict rules. Why this happened is still a mystery, and you might need many other excavation trips to find out the truth. It's lucky that your next destination is really close by. Still in New Mexico, you'll visit the Blackwater Draw. It's a national prehistoric site that holds the story of the Clovis people. You're shocked to find out that the Clovis are possibly the oldest humans to have inhabited the U.S. They were the first humans to allegedly cross the Bering Strait and follow the ice-free trails down to the U.S.'s southern plains. Try to picture what this area looked like when the Clovis people roamed this land. A huge spring-fed lake with mammoths, giant sloths, saber-toothed tigers, and bison much bigger than the ones we have today wandering around. The archaeological site you're visiting shows that the Clovis population were big game hunters. You're able to identify the bones of several mammoths and even the stone tools that our prehistoric ancestors used to hunt them. Some of these date back to 13,000 years ago, aka the end of the last ice age. You're presented with two possible theories on the disappearance of the Clovis population. It's possible that during the final 1,500 years of the last ice age, changes in climate caused a shortage of food. Scientists also believe that this situation was worsened by overhunting. Another theory suggests that a large meteor hit North America, and this was enough to alter the climate and make the Clovis people migrate southward to try to survive. But the truth is, there's no evidence that any of that happened. Next, you'll fly to the Pacific Ocean, to the mysterious Easter Island. This place has left us with many questions, from the building of 13-foot-high face statues to the sudden disappearance of the Rapa Nui people who inhabited the area. You approach the island at Anakina, a white sandy beach on the island's northern shore. Researchers believe this area was one of the first settlements of the Rapa Nui. You could say you're standing at the end of the world, as you're over 3,000 miles away from South America and 1,000 miles away from the nearest island. Around 800 CE, when the first humans arrived, the island was an oasis. Today, the area is mostly deserted. You get your first clue on the fall of the Rapa Nui from an excavation pit you open at the beach. There's clear evidence of human presence: charcoal, tools, and bones, some of them belonging to rats. Bingo! When humans arrived at Easter Island, they brought along rodent companions. They probably didn't know this at the time, but these rodents would contribute largely to their demise. Rats love palm trees, which helped to deforest the natural vegetation of the island gradually over the years. But there's another clue. Looking into genetic data, you discover that South Americans came into contact with the Rapa Nui around 1722. What might have happened to this population is the same that happened to other more isolated groups. The contact with foreign groups brought about diseases that possibly led to the end of the Rapa Nui. To finish off your trip, you're headed to Cambodia. The country was once home to the great Khmer Empire from the 9th century CE to the 15th century CE. The ruins of this place are magnificent. Your main excavation site is the Plains of Angkor, built alongside the Mekong River. This huge site was the most important Khmer city at the time. Just FYI, Angkor actually means capital city in the Khmer language. The Khmer were able to build a huge network of roads connecting Angkor with the rest of the empire. And it's believed that up to 1 million people were spread throughout the Khmer Empire at its peak days. It was the largest pre-industrial city in the entire world. It's comparable in size to modern-day Los Angeles, just so you can get an idea. The Khmers were also master builders and engineers. They managed to build a complex irrigation system that helped their rice farming through the centuries. And to connect their cities, they built almost 500 miles of intricate highways and bridges. Oh, and not to mention the complex architecture of their religious buildings, such as Angkor Wat, one of today's most visited tourist sites in Cambodia. It took over 30 years to build, and it spreads over almost 500 acres. Back in the day, its towers were probably decorated with gold, but today, the site is a maze of vine-covered temples. Like your fellow researchers that came here before you, you're unsure of what caused this civilization to be wiped off the map. One possible guess has to do with the climate in the region. Strong monsoons might have caused massive floods and severe damage to the infrastructure, especially to the water system the Khmer people heavily relied on to survive. But another reason could have been regional conflict and immigration. Toward the end of the 15th century, the empire started to decline in numbers, and this could have weakened its strong power. You might not go home with many answers, but you've certainly learned a lot, huh?
It was September 7, 1695, somewhere at sea near the Horn of Africa. A merchant ship laden with treasure was sailing from present-day Yemen to its home port in India. Its escort had previously been captured by pirates, and now it was their turn, as they spotted a frigate approaching them fast. From its mast pole, a red flag with a Jolly Roger on it fluttered in the wind. Once the battle was over, a British pirate named Henry Avery sailed away with one of the biggest catches ever. It all happened during the golden age of piracy, from 1690 to 1730. At that time, all ships sailing across the Atlantic Ocean feared the European pirates, and you could hear "Arr, matey" in taverns on several continents. From the coast of North America all the way to South America, they would engage merchant vessels and steal their cargo. The Caribbean was a real hotspot for piracy. Do the names Blackbeard and Captain Kidd sound familiar to you? Or is it just me who read too many pirate stories? Anyway, as the 17th century drew to a close, the thirst for wealth made some pirates sail down the eastern coast of Africa and into the Indian Ocean. This is how Avery ended up so far in the east, but he was not the only European to sail in that direction. At the time, the Indian Ocean was teeming with merchant ships, as convoys transported luxury goods or pilgrims from Mecca in the Arabian Peninsula to the Mughal Empire in what is today India. The rich cargo included silk, spices, incense, and perfumes. In addition to these goods, the East India Company transported everything from cash to jewels on behalf of several European empires, such as England, Netherlands, and France. Sounds pretty much like any pirate's dream, doesn't it? The most attractive targets were ships that belonged to the Mughal Emperor, whose impressive realm covered nearly the entire Indian subcontinent. Back in the Caribbean, cloth, timber, and spirits were the most common types of cargo. It didn't seem good enough to the most ambitious pirates. They set their minds on more luxurious catch, gold, gems, and silver they could get in the Indian Ocean. Adam Baldridge, who was a wanted man in British-ruled Jamaica because he took a man's life, was among the first to arrive. Through not-so-honest means, in 1691, he managed to establish a safe haven for pirates on St. Mary's Island, near the remote northern coast of Madagascar, 250 miles off the African mainland. The place sat close to major shipping routes between Europe and Asia. Talk about an ideal location. The pirates made sure to fortify the island. As you can guess, they didn't like unexpected guests and enjoyed staying there, having fun in safety. A Frenchman, Olivier Levasseur, and his English colleague, John Taylor, were among the most successful of those islanders. In 1721, they easily captured a Portuguese treasure ship. It didn't go so smoothly, though. A serious storm damaged the ship, so they had to dock at the island of Reunion for repairs. There were important individuals aboard, such as the Viceroy of Portuguese India and the Bishop of Goa. But the loot was the pirate duo's biggest feat. Cash, diamonds, and porcelain worth hundreds of millions of US dollars in today's money. The catch was so enormous that the pirates didn't even bother to rob the rich passengers. But even this heist couldn't overshadow what Henry Ivory had achieved 26 years earlier. We don't know a lot about the life of this Englishman, except that he was born in Plymouth and that he served in the Merchant Marine. In 1694, Ivory became the first mate aboard Charles II, a privateering ship hired by the Spanish crown. Such ships were privately owned and engaged by nations during major conflicts with other nations. Ivory's ship had an important mission of tracking French smugglers in the Caribbean, but soon the tables would turn. Ivory was good with words and led a successful mutiny in 1694. After he left the unfortunate captain ashore and renamed the ship Fancy, the new captain set sail for Madagascar. There, news reached Ivory that a large fleet of 25 ships was soon to leave for its home in India. Apart from pilgrims, the fleet included several treasure ships owned by the Grand Mughal of India himself. Ivory didn't waste time and assembled an armada of 6 ships to go after the Mughal convoy. As soon as they spotted the fleet, the pirates started a chase. They managed to board an escort vessel, stealing gold and silver worth more than $17 million in today's money. And if that wasn't enough, Ivory and his men went after the flagship named Ganjai Savai. It was the biggest ship in all of India at the time that could protect itself better than the whole fleet combined. The pirates got lucky, as one of their volleys cut the main mast of the Indian ship in half, and there was more serious damage to it. Ivory brought his ship alongside the crippled Mughal ship, and his men boarded the vessel. Indian sailors showed some impressive resistance, even though their captain had abandoned them. Ivory's men won in the end, and they got one of the richest pirate catches ever. They filled their chests with hundreds of thousands of pounds in jewels, gold, and silver. After it, the pirates set course for the Bahamas and used their enormous wealth to convince the local ruler to let them come ashore. Their most prized possession, their ship, the Fancy, was included in that deal. Once the news of the heist reached the Emperor of India, a huge diplomatic scandal broke out. The Grand Mogul was enraged and accused the East India Company of plotting against him, arresting several of their high-ranking officials. The company feared that the Indian leader would cancel their valuable trade agreements, So they decided to do something nice for him and bring to justice the pirates responsible for the theft. Together with British ships equipped for search at sea, they launched one of the first truly international pursuit of Ivory and his shipmates, promising a reward to whoever captured him. The pursuit was only partially successful, as they only managed to catch and trial several pirates. Most of them scattered across Europe and the Americas, keeping their share of the wealth. Ivory earned himself the nickname the King of Pirates because of his adventure in the Indian Ocean. Historians believe he escaped to Ireland with his share of the loot using a false name, George Washington. No, I made that up. Piracy was a risky trade, and not all European fortune seekers were successful in the East. Take Dutch pirate Dirk Schijvers, who entrapped 4 ships in the Indian port of Calicut. He demanded money from the local Indian authorities and the East India Company, but they offered him only half of the requested sum. Finally, they settled on a different amount. When it didn't arrive, Schijvers set another ship ablaze. By this point, both the British and the Indians had had enough, and they hired 10 Indian pirate ships to drive Schijvers away, which they succeeded in doing. The pirate captain was forced to return for repairs to St. Mary's Island empty-handed. Oh well. The end of the 18th century and an increased European presence in the region brought about the end of the golden age of piracy. As the British authorities increased raids on pirate strongholds, the number of pirates decreased significantly. In 1692, a huge earthquake that was followed by a tsunami erased a well-known pirate haven from the map, Port Royal in Jamaica. But piracy in the Indian Ocean never fully disappeared. Modern pirates might not have an eye patch or a parrot on their shoulder, but they mean business just as the pirates from the past. The Strait of Malacca connects the Indian Ocean to the Pacific, and today, around 40% of world trade takes place through it. Despite this fact, piracy was alive and well here even in the 21st century. The national authorities of Malaysia and Indonesia, 2 countries the strait separates, were finally able to curb piracy only in 2016. No, it's not a romantic story at all.
You're walking down the street. You see a strange-looking antique shop called Ageless Trinkets of Mr. Bright. You're curious, so you enter there. You take a look at all the weird stuff. Suddenly, an old folded parchment paper catches your attention. It's a world map, but something's off with it. Instead of showing the countries as you know them, it shows the locations of 4 mythical lost worlds and civilizations. Mr. Bright, the shop owner, comes next to you after realizing your shock. This map won't let you find these places or anything, but I can explain to you the legends behind them if you want, he says. Let me begin with Atlantis. You might know it as Aquaman's underwater kingdom, but Atlantis, the fictional island, was actually first introduced in 2 of Plato's works. According to him, Atlantis was a highly advanced civilization that existed about 9,000 years before his own time, and its story had been passed down by poets, authors, and others. He wrote about Atlantis and its citizens to give a moral lesson and to teach about the dangers of arrogance, as well as the eventual downfall of those who are after too much power. In his dialogues, Plato stated that Atlantis was a great and powerful empire that was respected in all parts of the world. It was founded by beings who were half deities and half human, and became a great naval power after a while. Being an island filled with gold, silver, and other precious metals certainly helped their case. But besides that, it was also known for its breathtaking architecture and state-of-the-art technology, as well as its countless rare and exotic wild animals. Atlanteans were proud of their great achievements and the perfection of their civilization, but their excessive pride was going to bring their downfall. They believed they were so superior that they could gain control over any nation. This led them to launch a series of invasions. They conquered many of the Mediterranean lands, but when it was time to enter Athens, Athenians pushed back with an extraordinary force, so the Atlanteans were finally defeated. Plato stated that deities then got angry at Atlanteans because of how wicked, greedy, and immoral they became. So they punished them by sending earthquakes, which caused Atlantis to sink beneath the sea. Although the earliest written records of Atlantis were Plato's works, some people still believed his story to be based on truth and tried to identify the island of Atlantis with actual countries. Some people suggested it may have been located in the Mediterranean Sea, near the coast of Spain or Italy. Others thought it may have been located in the Caribbean, off the coast of Central or South America, but there was no solid evidence to support any of these claims. One theory, in particular, seemed more plausible than the others, though. Located in the Aegean Sea, the island of Santorini was the home of a highly advanced Minoan society. However, due to a huge volcanic eruption, it was destroyed about 3,600 years ago, causing the Minoan civilization to suddenly disappear. These similarities between the fictional Atlanteans and the historical Minoans made Santorini a good candidate for the speculations. Yet again, there were still major flaws with it, such as how the time when Plato said Atlantis was destroyed doesn't coincide with the time of Santorini's eruption. So Atlantis still continues to be regarded as nothing more than a popular legend in the scientific world. Now, let's move toward the northeast direction on the map, Mr. Bright says. According to Celtic Breton mythology, there once was a magnificent city called Ys, also known as Caris, that towered over Douarnenez Bay in France's Brittany region. It was the most wealthy city in the entire Atlantic. It was especially famous for its beautiful gardens and buildings, and its citizens were all living comfortably and happily there. Dahut, who was King Gradlon's daughter in Breton legends and literature, had a deep love for the sea. She begged her father to build a city at the edge of the sea, and that is how the city of Ys was established. Little did she know that she would be the one responsible for the destruction of her father's beloved gift. You see, since the city was surrounded by the sea, it needed to be protected by a dike equipped with floodgates, and these gates could only be opened at low tide. And the only one who had the keys to these gates was the king himself. One day, a handsome red knight arrived at the city, but couldn't pass the gates. Dahut was so taken by him that she wanted to let him in. She knew that her father was the keeper of the only key to the city, so she sneaked into his room and stole it from him. Then she gave it to the Red Knight so that he could enter the city and they could be together. However, the Red Knight turned out to be the Prince of Darkness, and he intentionally left the gate open to the raging sea. The waves soon swallowed all of Ys. King Gradlon was able to escape on his magical horse, but Dahut couldn't. She turned into an evil mermaid who lured sailors into the sea. Today, if you go to Quimper, a city in Brittany, northwest France, you can find the statue of King Gradlon riding on his horse. Although the city of Ys is a legend, Brittany coast locals believe that on the days when the waters are calm, you can still hear the tolls of the city bells deep under the sea, if you listen carefully. Mr. Bright then points at the Indian Ocean on the map and says, "Now, have you heard about Lemuria?" Back in the mid-1800s, a few scientists suggested that there was once a continent that existed in the Indian Ocean, somewhere close to the south of modern-day Sri Lanka. The first one to popularize this theory was the British lawyer and zoologist Philip Lutley Sclater. In his paper, The Mammals of Madagascar, he stated that he found lemur fossils in India, and not in Africa. However, this discovery was extremely shocking to him because of the fact that lemurs' original homeland, Madagascar, is much closer to Africa. He proposed that this was possible only if some larger continent connected the two once. He stated that this continent must have eventually sunk to the ocean floor. He then named it Lemuria, and hence the theory was born. People who came after Sclater took his theory a step further and thought that Lemuria was also the home of an extinct race of humans called Lemurians, who had 4 arms and enormous bodies, and were also the ancestors of modern-day humans, as well as lemurs. Of course, as new scientific discoveries were made on plate tectonics, evolution, and the study of DNA, the theories regarding the fictional continent called Lemuria were debunked. The last fictional land on the map is Agartha, Mr. Bright says. Taking its roots from Eastern mysticism, one legend says there's a kingdom called Agartha that is located deep beneath the surface of the earth. It's where all 4 corners of the world are connected by paths and tunnels. It is said that there's a secret entrance into Agartha hidden in the Gobi Desert, and it's built by Agarthans themselves using advanced technology that can't be detected by us, the surface folks. According to some beliefs, Agartha exists to counterbalance the energies of those who live above the surface. While we live in a state of rush and heightened emotions, this world beneath us is the total opposite. Some even say that those who escaped Atlantis fled here to continue their lives inside the Earth's core. And yet, others think it's actually a land that's crawling with all kinds of monsters. But there's no need to be scared, since modern science proved Earth's core is not actually hollow and is a solid hot iron ball. So you can cancel your journey plans to the center of the Earth if you've made any. Thanks, Mr. Bright.
If you walk through this small stone doorway in Hierapolis, Turkey, you might never come back alive. Back in ancient times, people thought it was some sort of portal to the underworld. Romans would go in carrying perfectly healthy bulls, but after a few minutes, they would watch these animals collapse as if hit by some mysterious force. But what's even weirder is that nothing happened to people. They could walk in and out just fine. Now, recent studies might have an answer for these eerie happenings, and it all has to do with people's heights. The gate, known as Plutonium, named after Pluto, the deity of the underworld, is a stone doorway leading to a small 32-square-foot cave. But the real danger is what is going on beneath it. Hierapolis is a super active geological area, and there's a big crack under the city that constantly emits volcanic carbon dioxide, which comes up as a visible mist. During the day, the sun dissipates the gas. At night, the gas forms some kind of a carbon dioxide lake on the sheltered arena floor. At dawn, you need to get out of there before it's too late. This whole place can turn particularly life-threatening right before the sun rises, when the carbon dioxide concentration, about 15 inches above the arena floor, reaches 35%. That means birds, bulls, and even humans can suffocate and pass away in just a couple of minutes. But there is a scientific reason that explains how Romans could get out of there unharmed. The carbon dioxide concentration drops quickly with height. So animals perished while their handlers, being taller and standing up, could walk out and breathe safely. Most people can't stay inside the Bagarn fort after sunset. This 16th century fort, located about 146 miles from Delhi, is known as one of the most haunted places in India. During the day, the area is bustling with visitors who can walk through the main gate of this once grand fort city and check out the ruins of temples and palaces. But they will also see this big sign at the gate that dramatically warns everybody that all access is strictly forbidden after dark. That's probably because at night, according to locals, women can be heard screaming and crying in that place, along with the sounds of bangles breaking and strange music. Others have reported seeing shadowy figures and flashing lights among the ruins, or even smelling a strange perfume floating around. Yawata no Yabushirasu is one of Japan's most restricted forests, located in Ichikawa. The forest itself is a small area, covering just a little more than 40 square yards, and it is mostly a thick patch of mosu bamboo. Its location next to a parking lot and modern buildings makes it seem less intimidating, but don't be mistaken by its appearance. Since at least the 19th century, people have said that anyone who enters this forest is bound to disappear and never be seen again. So, as soon as you arrive, a sign near the forest tells you about its history and the curse believed to be linked to it. Some rumors suggest the creepy presence of an ancient samurai lord walking around. Other legends say that the forest hides a bottomless pit filled with poisonous gas. Whether these stories are true or not, today the area is enclosed by stone walls, and entry is still strictly prohibited. In a valley called the Dark Entry Forest in Connecticut, you will find Dudley Town, but you definitely shouldn't go inside. Not only has the land been private property since the 1920s, but it is also known as one of the spookiest places on Earth. This place was first settled in the early 1740s, and many of the original settlers were from the Dudley family. That's why it's called Dudley Town. There's a local rumor that the town's founders were descended from Edmund Dudley, an English nobleman who lost his life for treason. The legend says this curse followed the Dudley family all the way across the Atlantic to America, and their misfortune is said to be responsible for crop failures, mental problems, and several tragic incidents in the village. Again, it is all just rumors, since historians haven't found any real evidence to support these claims. Still, the pitch-black surroundings and the eerie Blair Witch Project vibe going on in that place fueled ghost stories in the 1980s. This led to many cases of vandalism in the following decade, and because of that, the landowners closed the area to the public. This old abandoned building used to be the fancy palace of King Farouk's family, who was the penultimate king of Egypt back in 1936. After his family members passed away, the palace was turned into a morgue. Locals say that today, the whole place is super creepy and off-limits. Some people have reported seeing light bulbs flicker and shadows move around, making strange noises. Once, a group of kids allegedly went inside and totally freaked out when they found all the doors had suddenly disappeared, leaving them in complete darkness. They had no choice but to start screaming for help. This Hawaiian island has been off-limits to people for over a century. It's called Ni'iau and is the smallest inhabited island in Hawaii, covering around 69.5 square miles. It has around 84 residents. The island doesn't have cell phone service, paved roads, or power lines, just solar panels for electricity. A single family has privately owned the island since 1864, when a Scottish farmer bought it for $10,000, which would be around $250,000 today. The island has stayed in the family, passing down to its descendants, the Robinsons. They have kept it private ever since, so access is highly restricted and basically by invitation only. The Erdstall tunnels are a network of about 2,000 mysterious underground passageways mainly found in Central Europe, especially in Austria and Bavaria. These tunnels are usually narrow and cramped, often just wide enough for one person to squeeze through at a time, and they are believed to date back to the Middle Ages, as far back as the 12th century. What's really puzzling about these tunnels is their purpose. Despite a lot of research, nobody really knows why they were built. There is a theory that they were used for storage, but since many of them are below the waterline and occasionally get filled with water, that doesn't seem very practical. These tunnels have very light, almost claustrophobic sections and sudden drops, which doesn't seem practical for other straightforward uses like escape routes, hiding places, or even spiritual purposes. To make things even more mysterious, there is a complete lack of artifacts, which makes it even harder for researchers to figure out what these tunnels were really for. Since 2019, adventurous people can get arrested if they try to climb this rock. Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock, has been off-limits because it is now considered a sacred site for local communities. But the fact that it is also extremely dangerous probably played a big role in the decision to close it off to visitors. This rock is 1,142 feet high, which is about the height of an 80-story building. The climb to the summit can be very slippery, and high temperatures, which can hit 116 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, have led to people passing away from dehydration and heat-related issues. Something even creepier happens at the top of the rock right after storms. When it rains, small tadpole-like crustaceans called shield shrimp hatch in temporary waterholes and rock pools on top of Uluru. These extraterrestrial-looking creatures are about 3 inches long, and they spread their super-resilient eggs everywhere. When enough summer rain comes, they hatch and go wild, feeding on microorganisms and bacteria in the water. How these strange creatures end up in the fleeting pools on top of Uluru is still unclear, but the most likely explanation is that their eggs might travel there with the wind. Now, we wouldn't call this island mystical unless there were tales of giants living here. The island of Gozo in Malta is the backdrop of an ancient legend. Malta is an island country located in the Mediterranean Sea, just south of Europe. It's a very strategically located archipelago. Throughout history, it was ruled by many different societies, such as the Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, and Carthaginians. One cold night, thousands of years ago, a farmer noticed the sky turn orange, then red, when he heard a loud thump. Although the ground seemed to be moving, this wasn't an earthquake. When he looked toward the woods, he saw a giant silhouette, taller than the trees. As he fearfully approached, he realized it was a woman, a giant woman. She introduced herself as Sansuna. Unlike the terrible giants of many tales, Sansuna didn't want to exterminate the human race. She was loving and caring. She told the farmer that she and her people could help protect their land from invaders. The locals were pretty interested in this offer. Since Malta is located in an important commercial route, it was constantly being invaded. The story says that Sansuna settled in Malta, and sooner rather than later, she was moving things around. And when I say things, I mean monoliths. Sansuna carried huge stones on her shoulder to build a magnificent temple called Gigantia, which means place of giants. She even did this while holding her half-giant, half-human kid on the other shoulder. Some say Sansuna lived exclusively on beans and honey, although others replaced honey with water. The funniest bit here is that Malta is the 10th smallest country in the world, but it somehow managed to host giants. Hey, go figure. The temple looked like a giant game of Tetris, with some stones weighing as much as 20 elephants. Some of these monolithic rocks are so heavy, scholars guess it would take 50 men working together to lift just one stone. Now, as much as this is entertaining, humans never proved giants were real, so this story couldn't be true. There's a brief mention of a species of giants called the Nephilim in some ancient texts. The Nephilims would have been terrible giants that wreaked havoc on the earth and only survived until the Great Flood. But nobody ever found real proof of this species really existing on Earth, until this came along. The world of Maltese archaeology unearthed quite a few shocking things in the past years. One of them are known as the Hypogeum skulls. Hypogeum is the Greek word for underground, and this incredible site was discovered in the first decade of the 20th century. Back then, Malta's National Museum director received an important phone call. Someone had accidentally dug some impressive bones and asked him to come check it out. The Hypogeum looked like an underground city, filled with mazes and rooms that stretched along multiple floors. They were all made with similar limestones as the Maltese temples above ground. The Hypogeum was filled with important relics and artifacts. Scientists quickly understood that the Hypogeum was built as a type of final resting place for locals. So, along with skulls, they found a lot of bones and skeletons. One of these artifacts were skulls, but these weren't regular human skulls. Rather, they were of the elongated type. To make matters worse, these skulls were hidden from the public for years. People started to talk and created a bunch of theories behind it. The truth is that this discovery was a turning point for Maltese archaeology, although scientists didn't know what to do with it. Some wondered if these skulls were natural or manipulated, since they knew some cultures in the world used head binds to alter their skulls. Other scientists threw in the hypothesis of little gray people or even the legendary giants. Some say that the elongated skulls could have been sculptures that worshipped otherworldly deities. There was no way to confirm any of these theories, so the question remained: who were the builders of Malta's megalithic temples? Now let's take a look at what scientists know. The Maltese megalithic temples have been standing strong since 3500 BCE, which is even older than the pyramids of Egypt. The main dilemma here is that these temples were built even before we invented writing, yet they required advanced technological skills to exist. The Gigantia Temple seems too absurd to have been built by humans. The South Temple has a corridor with 4 oval rooms on the sides, looking like a big shamrock leaf. In one of these rooms, scientists found altars decorated with spiral patterns. It looked like an altar of some sort, indicating early Maltese people used them for ritualistic purposes. The North Temple is similar but smaller, with a very low entrance that makes people crouch down to get inside. You get it? You need to bow down to their deities in order to get into this sacred place. I mean, one can't help but wonder about the secret reasons these ancient builders had to build such a huge temple. I'm thinking they probably cast one of Daenerys' dragons to move the monoliths around. Yeah, I'm joking here. But hey, remember the entrance to King's Landing? Yup, the series used the Medina Gates in Malta as the exterior of King's Landing during Episode 3 of Season 1. Anyways, back to the giants. The ritualistic theory of the whole thing won a few points when archaeologists uncovered these mysterious figures. They're popularly known as fat ladies. These tiny statues have round bodies and faces that show how much they enjoyed life. They kind of look like a miniature Sunsana, the giantess we talked about. Scientists believe these were statues that celebrated well-being and prosperity. It does prove that the people of the time had advanced craftsmanship skills, and they were pretty intentional with their constructions and art manifestations. One of these statues is known as the Sleeping Lady. This Neolithic piece of art depicts the figure of a large woman lying on her side sleeping. After studying it deeper, scientists guessed this statue was meant to represent the Great Reaper. It was found in the Hypogeium, which we now know was a huge resting place. This specific statue is different from all the other fat ladies, starting with the hair and the embroidered skirt. Then there's this statue. This is supposed to represent an 8-foot-tall woman and the rim of her skirt. She was discovered in the most unusual of ways. A farmer was trying to plow his field, but he kept hitting large blocks of stone. All the way back in 1915, the farmer called Malta's National Museum director and asked him to come check it out. Some think this is all the proof you need to confirm that Sunsana was real. Others aren't all that sure. But that's not all. The place where this giant statue was buried revealed one of Malta's most impressive archaeological sites, the Tarsian temples. The temples were made from limestone blocks. Some are 20 feet tall and weigh around 20 tons. Zamet, the museum director, kept digging and discovered multiple sites made of megalithic stones. All of them supposedly built by Stone Age farmers, all stranded on a remote island in the Mediterranean Sea thousands of years ago. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, look at these temples in Manidra. This is probably the world's earliest calendar. On the equinoxes, the sun passes directly through the main doorway, straight down the central axis. On the solstices, there are two superb variations. During the summer solstice, the rays fall on the edge of the megalith to the left of the doorway, and during the winter, the rays fall to the right side of the doorway. It's astronomical precision at its finest. And what about the structures in the Hall Tarsian that we've already talked about? This complex is the oldest one in all of Malta. It was built with the purpose of doing animal offerings to deities. Scientists confirmed this by unearthing numerous animal bones buried in the soil. They also found a great collection of spirals, indicating that the locals also used this temple for ritualistic purposes. Overall, there are 7 megalithic temples in Malta, each more impressive than the other. Scholars keep on digging to see if they can uncover the truth, much like researchers do with the pyramids of Egypt, the lost Mayan cities in the Americas, and other sites.
We're in the Caribbean, and these are the Taino people. Scientists have long believed that they were the first inhabitants of the Greater Antilles, and those people were roaming the Isles long before Columbus discovered this place. However, a recent discovery showed that there were some other peoples living there. These guys are called the Archaic people, and they are now known for being good at using stone tools. They've used a whole bunch of polished tools, such as hammers, axes, and whatsoever. We still haven't found out how they managed to invent and produce all those tools without special equipment. Scientists are now looking for a sort of necropolis, or a similar archaeological site, to find out more about these people. Another curious settlement was found a couple of years ago, not far away from Florida. This one is pre-Columbian too. but it seems that the dwellers there were more into fashion than crafting using stone tools. The scientists discovered a complex of 37 oyster shell rings. There were many households with these rings, and the locals would produce beads from the shells of marine creatures. By the way, long ago, beads weren't intended only for fashion, but they were also an important social instrument. People would sew them on their clothes to manifest their power or wealth. Sometimes archaeologists manage to discover whole cities. This is exactly what Eleni Korka, an archaeologist from Greece, did. She found the lost city of Tania back in 2018. It wasn't a lucky coincidence. The whole search took as much as 34 years. By the way, Tania was even considered a mythical city. The city of Tania was a Trojan-founded city, and the ancient texts claimed it was incredibly wealthy. Well, seems like the texts were true. The archaeologists found around 200 coins on the site. Some jewelry was found there too. For instance, there was an iron ring with a seal. They also found a gold coin that was supposedly used to pay for a journey to the afterlife. Yeah, back then, people believed that it existed, and they needed to pay for a ticket to get there. The discovered clay, stones, and marble floors help us imagine what their dwellings looked like. And the archaeologists also found some vases there. One of the earliest examples of human-made art is located in the cave of Altamira in northern Spain. The paintings in a Paleolithic cave are so special because they're not monochrome, but have several colors combined. Still, these earliest masterpieces were hidden for a long time. They were only discovered in 1868, and today, this cave is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Despite how old these paintings are, they're well preserved because they've been well isolated for all this time. Since the gallery was located deep in a cave, it was almost impossible for external climatic influences to ruin these prehistoric masterpieces. We are now in England, 2009. Meet Terry Herbert, a member of the Blockwitch Research and Metal Detecting Club. One day, he was casually inspecting plowed farmland in Staffordshire with a metal detector. I guess he must have wanted to find something special, but I bet he didn't expect to find what he actually stumbled upon. He discovered something that scientists later called the largest hoard of Anglo-Saxon gold and silver metalwork ever found. There's a list of items discovered, but if I start reading it to you, it's going to take me a really long time. To make a long story short, the archaeologists found 11 pounds of gold, 3 pounds of silver, and about 3,500 pieces of jewelry. No wonder this discovery is called the Staffordshire Hoard. The Birmingham Museum and the Art Gallery and Potteries Museum chipped in and bought the entire collection for over £3 million. Messages in a bottle are a famous cultural phenomenon we often see in movies, but it turns out this method of preserving letters is quite efficient. This is proven by the Dead Sea Scrolls. Back in the 1940s, Bedouin shepherds discovered 7 scrolls contained in clay jars in a cave. These scrolls were determined to be around 2,000 years old. But these manuscripts were only the beginning of a number of great discoveries. The Bedouins sold these manuscripts, but people continued finding more. The last discovery took place in 2021, and who knows, maybe there's more to find. Another piece of art recently found in a cave was a painted shell. This fossil was discovered in northern Italy, and scientists believe such fossils were collected by Neanderthals. This find is curious for a reason. Neanderthals are believed to have been quite primitive, but this shell proves the opposite. Back in 2004, Robert Muckle, an archaeology professor, heard about a peculiar site hidden in the forest of the North Shore Mountains of British Columbia. Robert knew that a few old cans and a saw blade had been found there. This place was believed to be a sort of logging camp, but a thorough excavation that took 14 years to complete revealed something different. Turns out, it wasn't a logging camp, but a long-lost Japanese settlement. The archaeologists found around 1,000 items, such as white and blue rice bowls, teapots, pocket watches, sake bottles, and buttons. The ceramics weren't that well preserved, so they only discovered hundreds of fragments. In one of his interviews, Robert mentioned that they also found remnants of a bathhouse. The community that lived there was pretty small, since there were only about 14 houses found. The scientists believe that they must have lived there in secret. People have changed their preferences over the centuries. Fashion has certainly changed, and our houses too, not to mention our technologies. But there's one thing for sure that's been unchanged: our love for food. Scientists managed to discover some of the oldest examples of people's favorite food. They inspected some ancient pottery and managed to find traces of best-loved food dating back to around 2000 BCE. It all happened in Sicily. And guess what that food was? No, it wasn't pizza or pasta, but olive oil. And there's more. Researchers from Egypt discovered some lumpy substance in some ancient pottery, which turned out to be cheese. It dates back to the 13th century BCE. I guess it didn't smell nice, since that cheese is estimated to be over 3,000 years old and was bacteria-ridden. Cool fact here, this cheese must have been quite exquisite. After studying it, scientists came to the conclusion that it was cooked with a variety of milks. They claim ancient people used a mixture of cow's milk and sheep or goat's milk. You probably thought, hey, you mentioned olive oil and cheese, but what about bread? Sure, bread is inseparable from almost any culture, and different people have had their own type of bread. And there's scientific proof that bread was one of the first dishes people learned how to cook. A group of archaeologists found some bread that was over 14,000 years old. 14,400 years old, to be precise. What's weird is that people back then weren't familiar with agriculture. They were hunters. And technically, this old bread predates the age of agriculture by 4,000 years. Yeah, there's still much to learn about the ancient world. Here comes not the sun, and the Beatles song, but here comes the bonus fact. And right, it's about the Beatles. Yeah, I know, they're not exactly new. The band was formed in 1960. But not all of our facts have to be thousands of years old to be cool. Back in 1966, the Beatles did a live performance of their song Paperback Writer on the TV program Top of the Pops. The BBC somehow didn't record the performance, and all the fans were sure it was lost. Nope. Turns out that David Chandler, a fan of the Beatles, recorded the show with his personal camera. It was long forgotten and stored in the attic for many years. The recording was rediscovered in 2019. I guess that's a pretty cool find.
Let's embark on a wild thought experiment. What if we could magically travel to all our ancestors in chronological order? Could we talk to them and actually form some connection? And just how far back can we go while still connecting with them? Well, let's see. Primates were the funky cousins of other mammals. Around 85 million years ago, during the late Cretaceous period, they went their own way and became the first of their kind. Human evolution is very complicated, and we can't draw a distinctive line on where it started. But we're going to imagine you hopped in your super cool time machine and landed in the past, way back when hominins were chilling around. What would happen? First off, you'd spot these quirky creatures roaming around with their short, hairy bodies, curious faces, and big eyes. They might look a bit different from you, but that's part of the fun. They were excellent climbers and incredibly curious about the outer world. They munched on fruits, nuts, and whatever they found in nature. And yes, surprisingly, humans aren't meat eaters by nature. Originally, we all were vegans. Of course, with them, you can forget about proper communication. But still, primates are incredibly smart. So, a good old game of charades could do the trick. Mime your way into their hearts with friendly gestures, and they'll be thrilled to see a futuristic traveler like you. These hominins were curious beings, so they'd probably be very interested in you if you were friendly with them and gave them some food. Next, let's move on to Homo habilis and Homo erectus. Their period, the Stone Age, started about 2.6 million years ago. As you can guess, it was the time when we started using stone tools. The Stone Age lasted for roughly 3.4 million years and ended between 4000 BCE and 2000 BCE. It ended with the beginning of metalworking. Homo habilis, or handyman, was like the MacGyvers of the Stone Age. These crafty creatures were the first to use stone tools. And Homo erectus was the upright man. They were a bit more recent. As their name suggests, they were the first to walk on two legs like us. They might have looked a bit different from modern humans, but still. So what were their lives like? Well, they still were true survivors. Homo erectus loved to explore and tinker with things. They made simple stone tools, like sharp rocks for cutting and scraping. They were basically the early inventors. Homo erectus was quite adventurous. They left Africa and traveled to far-off lands, exploring new territories. They were the first ones to set foot in places like Asia and Europe. They lived in caves or simple shelters made of sticks and animal hides. And let's not forget their wild fashion sense. Animal skins and leaves were their trendy outfits. But don't think they just sat around all day. They were hunters and gatherers, seeking out delicious fruits, nuts, and even hunting animals. How would you communicate with them? Well, they used simple grunts, gestures, and body language to understand each other. So, if you met Homo habilis and Homo erectus, you'd be in for a wild ride. You could show them some advanced technology to impress them and teach them some new cool tricks. Next on our list are Homo heidelbergensis and Neanderthals. Homo heidelbergensis was like the cool older cousin of Neanderthals and us. They lived around 800,000 to 200,000 years ago. Picture them as sturdy and strong, with big brains compared to their earlier relatives. They were expert tool makers and loved exploring new places. The Neanderthals lived in Europe and Asia from 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. Neanderthals were super smart, and they had awesome adaptations to cold weather. With their thick, strong bodies and big noses, they could handle chilly winters like champs. Both Homo heidelbergensis and Neanderthals were skilled hunters and gatherers. They'd chase after mammoths and other big game with sharp spears they crafted themselves. But it wasn't all rough and tough. They knew how to have fun, too. Neanderthals made art and showed their emotions and connections with each other. With these folks, you could draw pictures in the dirt, dance around, and make gestures. They'd get the idea. And finally, we meet Homo sapiens. Picture this. You're waking up in a cave with your family, trying to keep warm by a flickering fire. The cave is pretty cozy, isn't it? But nope, no permanent homes here. You're part of a nomadic tribe, moving wherever the food is best. Hey, but at least you've got some nifty tools to survive. Grab your awesome handmade spear, crafted by watching others or maybe invented by your genius self. Time to go hunting mammoths. And if mammoths aren't cooperating, just gather nuts, berries, and bird eggs. Stone Age humans were real foodies. They made flour from oats and spiced things up with wild onions and mustard seeds. There were artists, too. Using minerals and bones, they created stunning images and even flutes for some musical entertainment around the campfire. You still can only talk in body language and facial expressions. But Homo sapiens were smarter than their ancestors, so you could even teach them basic gestures and their meaning, like hands up for mammoth and stuff. Maybe try doing a funky dance or a happy jig. That would get their attention for sure. But this wouldn't be the only way to communicate. Stone Age peeps loved drawing and making flutes, so you could totally join in on the creative fun. Show off your artistic skills with a drawing or two, or maybe even play some tunes. Don't worry, they would be impressed by your skills, even if you aren't that far away from them. But tools are definitely the way to their hearts. If you brought some handy gadgets or cool inventions from our time, they'd be super impressed. Just create some simple tool from the future that can make their lives easier, and they'll love you instantly. So, while you might not be having deep philosophical debates with the Stone Age crew, you can still share some good times. Learning is the way to go. Besides, even though life was shorter back then, averaging around 30 years, it's still enough time to find a partner and have kids. Though, the dating pool might be a bit limited. So let's leave that topic for another time. Just hold on to that axe at night because, well, sometimes our ancestors would eat each other and like to do some head-dumping battles. Yikes. Let's finish our journey with the Bronze Age, just for fun. This cool era lasted from around 3300 to around 1200 BCE, and guess what? They were all about that strong metal called bronze. It's the time when people got creative and started using bronze to make all sorts of cool things. Bronze is a combo of copper and tin, making it harder and more durable than anything else at the time. Awesome civilizations started popping up all over the place. They either made their own bronze by smelting copper and mixing it with tin, or traded for it with other places. So, as you step into this ancient era, you'll be amazed by the sight of bustling Bronze Age cities with majestic bronze gates, amazing markets, and grand temples dedicated to powerful gods. During the Bronze Age, we finally developed languages and writing. Mesopotamia and Egypt were leading the way with their fancy cuneiform and hieroglyphs, the earliest writing systems ever. They were basically the kings of calligraphy. Remember, the language might be a bit different. You'd be hearing unfamiliar words. But with these humans, you can at least use drawings, art, and many other things to communicate. Anyway, this is what meeting our ancestors would be like. What a wild journey through time. So, remember to cherish our past and appreciate the wonders of our modern world. Stay tuned.
1,000 years ago, near modern-day St. Louis, Missouri, there was a vibrant, bustling city called Cahokia. It was a Native American city, the largest and most influential one in Mississippian culture. At its peak, around 1050 BCE, Cahokia was home to as many as 30,000 people, making it larger than Paris at the time. But what's interesting is that Cahokia didn't have any big marketplace. Usually trade was the backbone of any big city, yet this one stood out for archaeologists. That's because Cahokia wasn't about commerce. It was about culture, community, and parties. The people who lived there threw massive parties that would last for days. The city's grandest feature was its 50-acre plaza, surrounded by amazing earthen pyramids. This massive space could hold over 10,000 people. Imagine them all gathering there for festivities, dancing, drinking coffees and teas, feasting on deer, and betting on sports. The events were super lively. Cahokians would wear awesome costumes, style their hair in interesting ways, and decorate their bodies with tattoos. Athletes were playing a game called Chunky, where they hurled spears at a rolling stone disc, competing to get as close as possible. The roar of the crowd filled the air, and performers showed off their skills. These celebrations were so wild, they left traces in history. After the parties ended, Cahokians cleaned up by tossing leftovers into pits. Archaeologists have uncovered these waste pits, and they were filled with food remains and pottery. One pit alone contained the remains of 2,000 deer, and that's from a single event. They also found traces of yaupon holly, a caffeinated plant that was traded from hundreds of miles away. This just shows how much effort and thought Cahokians put in their celebrations. Would you like to live in a city like this? But aside from all the fun and games, Cahokia was also deeply complex and spiritual. The city was built on a landscape that mixed dry land with swampy patches. Many people believe that this symbolized the connection between the world of the living and the dead. The people of Cahokia saw their city as a bridge between these two realms. They built earthen mounds, both for ceremonies and rituals, and as construction support. These mounds rose from the swampy areas. Meanwhile, people settled in the drier spots. Elevated pathways connected these neighborhoods, creating a physical link between life and death. Isn't it sad that some ancient metropolises that rival modern cities in scale just disappeared? Cahokia's story came to a quiet end around 1350 CE, when the city was abandoned, all due to changes in environments and weather, floods, and other problems. But the influence of Cahokia was so big, it spread to distant places. Some of their traditions, like Chunky and Yaupan tea, have survived in native communities to this day. Today, Cahokia is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's not the only megacity we lost. About 5,000 years ago, people in the Indus Valley built some of the world's first cities. Mohenjo Daro was an ancient city in what is now Pakistan. The city was built around 2500 BCE, and back then, it was a thriving hub of the Indus civilization. Sure, it was much smaller than modern cities, but it was quite huge at the time, around 40,000 inhabitants. It looks like the locals were crazily strict and disciplined people. The city's planning and organization were incredible. It was laid out in a grid pattern. Streets and important buildings aligned along the north-south axis, probably to match the movement of the sun and moon. They also built one of the most advanced systems for water and waste management of their time. The city had about 700 wells. Nearly every house had its own. Most homes also had private bathrooms with drainages and even underground sewers. This shows how skilled these people were at staying clean. And with all this discipline, it looks like there were no kings, queens, or even a central government. They could still have some authority, like local elites or elected officials, just not a classic strict monarchy or religion. Instead, people there cared about simplicity and order. They basically managed themselves, having standardized ways of doing things, from the way tools and potteries were made to how they traded. Which is why, unlike many other cities, Mohenjo Daro didn't have grand palaces, temples, or monuments. Instead, they had public areas known as citadels. People gathered at citadels for rituals, meetings, and storage of grain. And it seems like this way of life worked perfectly. Scientists found some seals and weights, which means the economy was well regulated. Archaeologists found some intricate artifacts like ivory, lapis lazuli, carnelian beads, and gold jewelry. Another famous find is the small bronze statue known as the Dancing Girl, which was discovered in 1926. Mohenjo Daro wasn't poor at all. And they also pulled off some awesome buildings. Staying clean was clearly way more important to them than displays of wealth or power. So they created the Great Bath, one of the most famous structures in the city. It's a large, watertight pool built with baked bricks, perched on a mound of earth, being almost a religious place, the closest thing they had to a temple. Meanwhile, the city itself was built on a series of mounds. They grew taller over the centuries as people added new houses and structures. Why did the city fail? No one really knows. There's something mysterious about the sculptures archaeologists found. Many of them seemed intentionally broken. This means the city's later inhabitants, maybe invaders or something, destroyed them for some reason. Some scientists think that the Indus River may have shifted course, disrupting agriculture and trade. But there's no evidence of a flood or any big event like this. It just seems like, over time, the entire Indus civilization just gradually faded away. By 1900 BCE, the culture had shifted and didn't leave much behind. Let me tell you now about the ancient city of Kos, which is located where the modern town of Kos now stands in Greece. Imagine arriving by sea, and the first thing that hits you is the sheer grandeur of its agora, this massive public square built with stones in different colors, laid out on terraces that rise above you. It was one of the biggest in the ancient world, and it made a great impression on anyone approaching the city. This place has a rich history, dating back to around 2300 to 2200 BCE. A long time ago, local folk gathered up from different parts of the island to form a new city in the northeast. People have lived there since the Bronze Age, and over time, it became a super important center of culture and trade. And no wonder, since it's right near a natural harbor. The harbor was sheltered by two breakwaters, and people built some of the most important religious sites there, including the sanctuaries of Aphrodite and Hercules. Kos wasn't just beautiful, though. It had some brilliant design. The whole city was laid out in a neat grid, with streets crossing each other at perfect right angles, literally looking almost like a modern city. Thanks to this, moving around was super easy, and the blocks, or insulae, were big enough to fit several large houses. Kos remained largely unchanged until the 6th century CE. Over time, it started gradually shrinking in size, confined within the walls of what is now the Chora neighborhood. Meanwhile, Palmyra was an ancient city built around a beautiful oasis sometime around the 3rd millennium BCE. Originally known as Tadmor, this city flourished as a major stop on the Silk Road, linking the Near East with Asia. It was a thriving center of trade and culture. They had a marketplace, assembly buildings, grand gates. In other words, this place was bustling with life. The city has been through many hands throughout its history, from the Byzantine to Arab caliphates, which is probably why it had some awesome architecture. An interesting blend of Greco-Roman, Persian, and Arabic vibes. The Temple of Bel, the Great Colonnade, and a Roman-style theater. But, like all the others, it decayed over time. Palmyra's importance faded, and by the early 1400s, it had been largely destroyed. But at least its ruins remained. Right now, they're a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
You know the old sayings. To appreciate life just a tad bit more, you sometimes need to walk a mile in a stranger's shoes. But the people surrounding you have roughly the same likes and struggles, right? What if you could experience human life as it was thousands of years ago, or even a couple hundred years? Why not? Trust me, you'll be amazed at the differences. And the similarities for that matter. Let's start with a time before smartphones, before fast food chains, and before even electricity was a thing. I'm talking about the Stone Age. During these times, our early ancestors were all about living in caves, simple huts, or teepees. They didn't do much apart from hunting and gathering for their food. If you'd lived back then, you might have used basic stone and bone tools. You would have needed those things to hunt all sorts of wild animals, from birds to woolly mammoths. Hey, you'd even cook your meals using controlled fire. Yeah, steaks go way back. But people back then weren't all muscle and no brains. These ancient humans were also the first to leave behind art. They used all sorts of funky materials like minerals and charcoal mixed into water, or tree saps to make their engravings. They even carved little figurines from stones, clay, or bones. Now, during those days, humankind also experienced the last ice age, which was a real bummer for a lot of the big mammals that our ancestors used to hunt. Obviously, things started to change. Humans began using smaller, more polished stone tools like spears and arrows. They even started to live near rivers and other bodies of water in nomadic camps. Think glamping, but without the fancy photo filters we use today. Later on, ancient humans switched from hunting and gathering to agriculture and food production. They started domesticating animals and cultivating cereal grains. They used all sorts of fancy new tools like polished hand axes and even began to settle down in the plains. Don't even get me started on the advancements they made in home construction and art. They were weaving, sewing, and making pottery like it was nobody's business. Our next stop in history, ancient Greece. Want to hear about what your home might have looked like back then? Turns out, ancient Greek houses were built around a courtyard or garden. It doesn't sound much different than what we're used to these days, right? But the walls were made of wood and mud bricks. No fancy concrete or steel for them. As for the windows, they were small and without glass. But hey, they had wooden shutters to keep out the hot sun. You probably wouldn't have had much furniture inside, but if you were lucky enough to be on the wealthy side, you might have decorated your walls and floors with colorful tiles and paintings. Unfortunately, when nature called, many homes didn't have a bathroom, so people had to rely on small vessels or even wash in streams they had nearby. I mean, imagine how awkward that must have been. Only the wealthy had the luxury of taking baths at home. At night, ancient Greeks slept on beds stuffed with wool, feathers, or even dry grass. And with no electricity, the only lights came from flickering oil lamps and candles. Wanna talk fashion? Turns out many people walked around barefoot. Some wore leather sandals, or for horse riding, high boots. When it got hot, some rocked wide-brimmed hats to shade their faces from the sun. One thing they definitely did right was jewelry. They sported everything from bracelets to earrings and even necklaces. Now, when it came to eating, men and women usually ate separately, and the rich always ate at home. The less privileged folks would eat in public. But get this, everyone ate with their fingers, so food was cut up in the kitchen first. Fancy being a knight in the Middle Ages next? Back in the day, those fancy pants knights were all about that manor life. But let me tell you, they didn't even own the land proper. Nope, they were granted rights to the income from a manor or other lands by an overlord. And as time went on, these lands were passed down from generation to generation, like a family heirloom. Oh, and forget about dividing that land up between all the heirs. Most lands went straight to the eldest son. Sorry, other siblings. And don't even get me started on the hierarchy. Society was extremely divided back then. Heads of state and the highest-ranking nobility were on top, controlling large pieces of land. Lesser nobles had authority over smaller areas of land and fewer people. And at the bottom of the noble club list were the other knights, who didn't even own land and had to serve other nobles. Not fun, right? However, your daily life might not have been that bad. You might have enjoyed some leisure activities too, like playing games, cue the chess matches, and listening to music of the troubadours. These musicians were incredible songwriters, skilled poets, as well as singers and instrumentalists. Let's proceed with the Renaissance. It was a time of change, excitement, and luxury. People were finally able to enjoy some of the finer things in life, like better clothes and nicer tasting foods. And boy oh boy did they love the arts. The streets were also filled with craftsmen, artisans, and merchants who had some money to spend. But don't get me wrong, life wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for everyone. The farmers and peasants still had to work hard all day long. Their homes were little more than one-room huts, while the wealthy merchants got to live in giant mansions. Sure, those mansions might have been dark and cold and pretty smelly, but at least they had space. Now, let's get to the good stuff. Fashion. Clothing was a big deal during the Renaissance. The rich would dress up in all sorts of fancy clothing, from tight coats for men to long dresses for women. Entertainment was all the rage during the Renaissance. If you lived back then, you would surely have loved going to festivals, sporting events, and playing games like chess, checkers, and backgammon. But the biggest event of all was Carnival. You would dress up in crazy costumes and had big parties. And of course, there was shopping. You would head to the marketplace in town where the local merchants and craftsmen would sell their goods. Money wasn't as regulated as it is today, and each city had its own currency with constantly changing values. Now, if you were lucky enough to go to school during the Renaissance, you were probably wealthy. It was the nobles that mostly learned about grammar and arithmetic, but some studied philosophy, Latin, and public speaking too. There's probably no other time in history more impactful on human life than the Industrial Revolution. What did it really mean, though? Well, picture this. Before this time period, people used to make things with their hands, in their own homes or small workshops. But then, someone had a brilliant idea to build big factories and use machines powered by engines to make products in large quantities. The first country to try this new way of doing things was England. But soon, the whole world caught on. The Industrial Revolution started in the cloth industry, where making fabric used to be a slow process. But with inventions like the flying shuttle, things got a lot easier. With all these new machines and factories, people needed a way to get raw materials in and finished products out. That's where transportation came in. The steamboat appeared in 1807. Then, someone came up with the brilliant idea to put a steam engine on top of wheels. And then on top of rails. Ta-da! The railroad was born in 1825. As you can imagine, all these things had a big impact on where people lived and how they worked. You might have needed to leave the countryside and move into bigger towns and cities to find work. But the cities were often dirty and crowded. And while the machines made work easier in some ways, factory work created a lot of problems for the workers. You might not have earned much, and the work was often dangerous.
Parietal eye, or third eye. One of the features we lost almost 250 million years ago. If you take a closer look at animals like frogs or lizards, there's a random dot somewhere between their eyes. It's not just a random dot, but an actual organ. Scientists claim it's some kind of sensor that detects daylight. Not just that, it produces melatonin, a special hormone that regulates our biological cycles, such as body temperature, reproduction, and sleep. They noticed this eye gradually became smaller over time, which means evolution realized it's a feature animals don't actually need. Maybe it happened because cells in our normal eyes became efficient enough, so we didn't need one more eye to sense or when we should sleep. Also, more and more animals were becoming warm-blooded with time, which means they were able to regulate their body temperature better. We have part of the organ even today, but in the form of the pineal gland in our brains, still in charge for melatonin. Either way, bye-bye third eye. There's a gene called GULA. With it, our ancestors could produce their own vitamin C. Not in a way they could set up a stand and sell it, but enough for the body to use it. Around 60 million years ago, the gene kinda stopped working. Not randomly. Our ancestors probably started getting enough of the vitamin C with the fruit they ate. Some of our very, very distant primate cousins that took a whole new direction in a family tree, such as lemurs, can still produce their own vitamin C. At some point, evolution decided they needed it, while we didn't. It's not just us. Our side of the primate family tree also doesn't need it anymore. Monkeys, apes, tarsiers, bye-bye gulab too. We have lemons and oranges now. Our body would lose lots of energy if it had to deal with all those traits our ancestors used to have. So it kind of deactivates those we don't need anymore. Let's say electroreception. It's the ability many amphibians and fish have. For example, the electric eel uses this feature to detect prey when water is murky, communicate, or as a navigation system. Humans and our land cousins lost this feature because electric current can't flow through the air that easily. Then, there's this thing called Jacobson's organ. It's found inside the nose and has a purpose to sense pheromones and odors. A snake flicks its tongue. Cats and horses make those weird faces. They all use Jacobson's organ. We also have it, but it doesn't quite seem to work. It doesn't send or receive signals from our brain, and scientists think we lost the ability to use it over 20 million years ago. As human habits and the way of life changed over time, we needed bigger brains.
Scientists have skull remains of our ancestors from different periods, so they've realized our brain got way bigger over the last 3 million years. We needed to think of ways to deal with climate changes, big predators chasing us, finding some new nice food. Yup, the brain grew for a reason. Food had a huge impact on our evolution. For instance, animals that only eat meat lost their sweet taste receptors because, well, they gave up on dessert, so didn't need those kinds of genes. Humans are omnivores, so we've always had a well-rounded set of receptors that could recognize tastes pretty good. These taste receptors came in handy because they could tell our ancestors which foods were good for them and which ones were toxic. Some bitter taste receptors stopped working through time, since humans have changed their eating habits. For instance, we learned to use fire for cooking, so many plants were less toxic for our bodies. We became sophisticated when it came to preparing food, and also learned how to share information we discovered by communicating and using language, like in cookbooks. We didn't need all the taste receptors anymore, so our body decided to shut them down and leave those that would come in handy in the future of our species. Whew! Luckily, we didn't lose our sense for nice chocolate. Our jaws have also changed. Our ancestral relatives had way bigger jaws, but since we started eating softer and cooked foods as well as using our brains more, the structure of our head needed some changes. Teeth became smaller too, plus we lost some. Many people never developed third molars, we also call wisdom teeth. They grew between the ages of 18 and 25. We can do without them, but for our ancestors, they were pretty much vital. By this age, their teeth had already become worn out, so third molars were possibly a replacement they needed. We may wonder why exactly we have body and head hair, but scientists wonder why we don't have more of it. Hair on our scalps is long, a bit shorter in some areas, and we don't have hair on the undersides of the wrists, palms, and the soles of our feet. One of the popular theories about human ancestors says that when moving from cool, shady forests to the hot, dry savanna, they got a new way of regulating their body temperature. They lost the fur along the way, which made it easier for them to catch their prey without overheating. Later, they discovered clothes and fire, which could keep them cozy during the cold times. Of course, there are more reasons for losing fur. Some say without fur, there's less chance of face lice or other parasites. Other researchers think that during dry seasons, humans would try to catch prey near lakes and shallow waters. Hair is not such a good insulator in water, so humans lost fur and instead got a layer of fat. Now, 85% of people can't wiggle their ears. There's a muscle that surrounds our outer ear, and scientists believe it used to allow our primate ancestors to move their ears in whichever direction they wanted. That helped them determine where the sound was coming from. After they started living in groups, they didn't have to completely rely on themselves, so they lost that feature. Apes can use their feet as well as they can use their hands, thanks to the plantaris muscle in their feet. With that muscle, animals can grip and do anything they want with objects they're holding. We also have this muscle, but it's underdeveloped and rather useless. 9% of humans are even born without it now. Hiccups are also one of the evolutionary leftovers humans may have gotten from their water-dwelling ancestors. Fish push water through gills, while amphibians gulp air. That's something mammals don't have wired into their brains, so this reflex can cause spasms of our diaphragm, which, in the end, leads to hiccups. When we're angry, our lips may twitch. That's also a feature that used to be important for our species. When they wanted to scare away predators or potential danger, they would bare their teeth, the same as bears, wolves, and chimps do. Lip twitching is the first step towards it. Many people want to climb to a higher position or sense the urge to lift their feet when feeling anxious or scared. Evolutionary biologists believe it's because so many early land mammals used to climb trees when they felt a threat coming. Goosebumps are something that we do have, but compared to old times, they're useless now. When hairy creatures felt cold, a reflex would contract those small muscles that make the base of hair follicles. That way, the coat was standing up and trapping more air, so they felt warm. Today, it's just a reminder you need a jacket and that nice feeling you get when hearing your favorite song on the radio. All living creatures can trace their ancestry to a single bacterium from billions of years ago. DNA is that special thing that holds all the information our cells need to know. We all start as one cell that then grows into trillions of them until our body is formed. DNA completely controls our growth, eye color, height, and so many other traits. It's not just humans. Even snakes have hip bones that say they used to have 4 legs, just like their dear cousins, lizards. Dolphins and whales have some kind of small bones in their bodies that show they used to have hind legs.
Yup, fossil remains say these marine mammals were once four-legged and walked on land. To be precise, about 50 million years ago. Evolution doesn't actually track a straight line from species to species. It's more like a huge tree with plenty of branches, where some lead to new ones, a trait there, a trait then, some in, some out, and bam, some completely new species are there. For example, birds. Who would have thought they evolved from dinosaurs? They even lost their teeth along the way. And yeah, both seem to be coming from reptiles. Oh, and those nuts over there, that's part of my family tree.
If you think you can balance a car on your head that is heavier than 352 pounds, then you have a good chance of beating the current Guinness World Record. John Evans from England, who holds it, found he had a superpower while he was working as a bricklayer. At 17, he could hold 24 bricks on his head. Years later, he started balancing fridges, cement mixers, kegs, and other objects on his dome to raise money for charity. He managed to hold a mini car on his head for 33 seconds in 1999. If anything had gone wrong, it would have cost him his life. It took another dangerous record breaker, Michel Lotito, 2 years to eat an airplane. He cut it up with an electric power saw to create bite-sized chunks. Then, he swallowed it piece by piece and washed it down with mineral oil and tons of water. Before you try to beat his record, you must know he had a special condition that made him crave and eat things that aren't food. He consumed over 9 tons of metal during his lifetime, including 18 bicycles, 15 supermarket trolleys, 6 chandeliers, 2 beds, a pair of skis, a computer, a coffin, and the commemorative Guinness World Records brass plaque. Mick Meaney from Ireland decided that he could break the world record for the most number of days buried underground and become famous. He spent 61 days in a coffin, 7 feet under the ground in 1968. Mick woke up at 7 in the morning every day, did a workout with partial press-ups, then had breakfast and read a newspaper. There were 2 pipes sticking out of his temporary home, one for food and one for ventilation, and keeping in touch with people above the ground. The TV worldwide, radio, and newspapers covered his adventure, but no one from the Guinness Book of Records was there when he resurfaced. Perhaps they found it too dangerous, so he never ended up in the book. The longest kiss ever recorded lasted 58 hours and 35 minutes. 9 couples entered the annual competition in Thailand, and one of them set this record on Valentine's Day in 2013. Guinness discounted this category because the rules of such competitions were too strict. The people had to keep their lips touching the entire time, no breaks at all. They could drink liquids using a straw, but they couldn't let their lips come apart, not even for a second. They had to stay awake and stand the whole time, and even if they needed to go to the bathroom, they had to keep kissing. To make things safer, they replaced the longest kiss with a new contest called the Longest Kissing Marathon, with short breaks to rest, eat, and even sleep. On October 14, 2012, 8 million people were watching Austrian skydiver Felix Baumgartner live as he beat 8 world records and the sound barrier. He lifted off from Roswell, New Mexico to the edge of space. He got there inside the largest balloon with a human on board, as tall as the Statue of Liberty when fully inflated. Several hours later, Felix was back as the first human to break the sound barrier in freefall, completing the highest freefall parachute jump and achieving the fastest speed in freefall. Nick Wallenda holds 11 Guinness World Records. He's the first person who walked a tightrope over Niagara Falls. Nick comes from a famous circus dynasty, the Flying Wallendas. He first walked the tightrope when he was just 13. He walked across the Grand Canyon and the Orlando Eye. That observation wheel is higher than the Statue of Liberty. It was windy and wet, but he landed another record that will be really risky to beat. Jin Song Gao has spent many years training his body to handle the freezing cold. He can sit in a tub filled with ice cubes, not for a minute, but for hours. Jin became the champion when he stayed in the ice for 113 minutes and broke a world record. A couple years later,
he managed to beat his own record by 2 minutes on a TV show. In the last 2 minutes, the audience cheered him on with music, which helped him push through. A fearless man from China covered his whole body in bees to create the so-called bee beard. This Italian tradition is from the 19th century. People place a queen bee on themselves to attract thousands of bees. The record breaker had to place not one, but 60 queen bees on his body to attract 637,000 bees. He set the official record for the heaviest mantle of bees. The Guinness adjudicators were there but watched from a safe distance. The new champion explained that the secret there is to stay calm. Bees usually won't bite, as it would cost them their lives, so you must not annoy them. Guinness doesn't accept applications for the longest fasting because they don't encourage people to deprive themselves of food. The only exception was in 1971. Angus Barbieri survived without food for 382 days. He was 27 and weighed 465 pounds when he started what was supposed to be a short fasting program at the hospital. But Angus felt so good and was determined that he convinced the doctors to let him continue. He even stopped working at his father's fish and chips shop to avoid any temptation to eat. He survived on vitamins, tea, coffee, sparkling water, and a small amount of yeast to give him the nutrients he needed. Angus got regular checkups to make sure he was okay. By the end of the fast, his weight dropped to 180 pounds. He stayed healthy after his fast and maintained a stable weight for years. If you wanted to get in the book of records because your pet is a plus-sized beauty, sorry, but it won't happen either. The heaviest cat ever, Himi, was from Australia. It passed away at the age of 10 because of health issues and will forever be the record breaker in this category. Himi weighed over 46 pounds in its final days in 1986. It was so heavy that it had to move around in a wheelbarrow. Guinness World Records figured out that people could start overfeeding their pets by force just to make it into the book and closed the category 12 years later. Now, they monitor the weight and size of animals by breed, but not by individual animals. Driving around the world at top speed is definitely an adventure, but it won't get you on the record list anymore. Many people tried to do it, setting record after record, going faster and faster. But by 1996, the Guinness organization decided to stop accepting new claims. It's just too dangerous and against the law to ignore the speed limits set in different countries. By the way, the first successful attempt to circumnavigate by car took 2 years and 1 month. In 1927, a racing driver and a filmmaker started off from Frankfurt, Germany, and finished just beyond the starting point in Berlin. If you want to set a new record in this field, you can try a boat, plane, helicopter, or maybe an autogyro. Dance marathons started in the US in the 1920s when a woman named Alma Cummings danced for 27 hours with 6 different partners. Everyone wanted to break her record, and soon, people all over the country were joining in. In the 30s, they became even more popular because they offered free food, a place to stay, and the chance to win huge cash prizes. The rules were tough. Dancers had to stay standing and keep moving their feet, even while eating, shaving, or reading. If a dancer was too slow, judges would tap their leg with a ruler to keep them moving. Sadly, in 1923, a man named Homer Morehouse danced for 87 hours, collapsed, and passed away. They immediately banned such marathons in Boston and LA, and New York followed.
Yo ho ho, a pirate's life for me! Let me stop you right there. If you think being a pirate or a sailor back in the old days was so cool, here's the harsh truth. It was not all about singing sea shanties and embarking on epic voyages across the 7 seas to find the Fountain of Youth or caves filled with gold. It wasn't actually that cool being at sea all the time, and I have 5 compelling reasons to prove you so. Let's dive in, pun intended. Now imagine this. You're so excited. You've been waiting for this day to come, and finally, it's official. You're going to become a real sailor. The captain tells you to get ready because the next day, you're going to set sail on a journey that is expected to take somewhere around 6 months, if you're lucky that is, because storms and singing mermaids could complicate things. You pack a few things. Now, let's pause this daydream for a quick second because here comes problem number 1. What I mean by packing a few things is just the clothes on your back. Sailors would only have one set of clothes that they almost never washed during the entire voyage. That's because they believed that dirt and grease would protect them from winds and rains. Okay, back to the thought experiment. You kiss your family goodbye and head to the port where your new home is waiting. One of your crew members not so warmly welcomes you on the deck and shows you where you'll be sleeping. This makes you start doubting your choice of becoming a sailor in the first place. Because after seeing it, you're certain that this is not going to be a 5-star hotel comfort level kind of experience. So, here's problem number 2. The ships were absolutely crammed. Back in the day, sailors would have to accept living in such conditions, whether they were working for a big name like Christopher Columbus or not. The Nina and the Pinta were 2 of Columbus's ships and the best sailing vessels of their time. Yet again, this didn't change the fact that they were so small that men had no place to sleep. Which gives us problem number 3. Having to sleep next to one another on a crowded deck where they could barely move was not so great for sailors' health conditions, and going below deck to escape the snoring of their fellow shipmates was not an option because there was no fresh air there. In addition, you could always come across a rat there. So, kiss personal hygiene goodbye. And in case you're wondering how rats got there, those little rascals are actually good swimmers. Also, sailors were at sea no matter the season or the weather, so they were often cold and wet, which also made it hard for them to stay healthy and strong. Speaking of health conditions brings us to problem number 4, and it's food and hunger. Sailors didn't have their own mini fridges with different kinds of condiments back then, like the compartments luxury cruises have these days. So, they had to come up with ways to store enough food that would last for months or even years. Due to that, their food options were limited. It definitely wasn't like the food prepared by Michelin star chefs. One of the most common food options on ships was salted meat, which wasn't as chewy as you might imagine. Or a biscuit called hardtack, also called sheet iron or worm castles. And there's a reason for all these creative nicknames. Hardtack was essentially a mix of water and flour baked into a cardboard-flavored cracker. They were brick-like, and the only way they could be eaten was if they were softened with water. If only sailors could dip them in their afternoon tea, right? Sometimes these biscuits would still be extremely dense. Then sailors would have to slam their fists down on them to break them into smaller pieces to be able to eat the stuff. As long as hardtack was kept dry, it rarely got spoiled. The sailors would be able to eat them after a year if they had any left. But most of the time, it would be extremely hard to keep them dry inside wooden casks. And then, they would get infested with bugs that would leave small holes behind. However, sailors would still eat them anyway. Have to take protein from somewhere. By now, you might have figured out that there were no fruits or vegetables in a sailor's diet. This caused vitamin deficiency in many sailors. So those toothless pirates and sailors in the movies you see? Yep, it's all because of poor nutrition. And the iron-hard crackers probably didn't help either. But when sailors ran out of food, not having a balanced diet was probably the least of their concerns. Back in the old times, a voyage could take way longer than expected due to weather conditions. There could be no winds to push the ship further. Or a powerful storm could shake the ship and the waves and water could destroy the food storage. So when such a situation happened, sailors could easily run out of food. Well, they could throw the net into the ocean and catch some fish, right? But sailors didn't eat fish even in the face of starvation. Many captains mentioned this in their logbooks, which were basically captains' diaries. The problem was not that sailors couldn't get fish. In fact, many different kinds of fish were caught in their nets, but they had to throw them all back into the sea. During the exploration era, Antonio Pigafetta mentioned in his logbook that the ship's crew caught an unbelievable amount of fish, but they didn't eat any of them. Also, in the same journal, he mentioned that 40 of the sailors lost their lives. Naturally, sailors thought that only poisonous fish were dangerous. And because of that, they were inclined to eat only the fish they knew. But even a well-cooked tuna could be poisonous, and they had to learn it the hard way. But it's not like they didn't have any methods to check fish. Spanish sailors, for example, put silver coins on them. If the silver changed color, they considered those fish to be poisonous, therefore inedible. So they would toss them overboard. Other sailors would place the fish they caught on the deck and observe if flies or other insects came to feast on it. If they didn't land on the fish, this meant that it was poisonous. But if insects did come, they considered it safe to eat. The problem of eating fish caught in the open sea dates back to as early as the 7th century BCE. Imperial healers in ancient China knew that eating fish was the reason why some sailors lost their lives. But they couldn't prove that the fish were poisonous, and the mystery remained unsolved up until the 19th century. In 1886, a Cuban doctor finally figured out that some fish contained poison in their tissues and muscles, even though they were considered a safe-to-eat breed. That kind of poison is actually something that is found in plankton. Some fish can eat this plankton without being affected. They store it in their bodies. And as they grow, the rate of the poison increases within them. And this is something that doesn't go away no matter how long one cooks the fish. If you still think that life at sea back in the old days sounds exciting, this fifth problem will convince you otherwise. Let's say you've managed to get along with your roommates, stay clean and healthy, and eat regularly. But there's always a risk of getting caught by pirates, and they didn't ask for things kindly. So, if you didn't want to end up as food for sharks, you would have to raise the white flag and simply join them. Not the career you were planning, right? Good luck scrubbing the deck for the rest of your life.
Here's an ordinary fish. And here's a fish that was supposed to become a human, but it didn't. And not because it didn't come out of the ocean. The second fish has more intelligent eyes, but there's almost no difference between them. And that's why... Oh, and do you see that silhouette in the shadow? This big ugly monster is one of the key characters in this story, and it hates the intelligent fish. But I'll tell you more about that later. So, the ocean world is an eternal struggle for survival. The big and strong eat those who are smaller and weaker. 400 million years ago, it was the same, only on an even larger scale. Real monsters inhabited the ocean. Giant reptilian fish ate long sea centipedes. Some fish were covered with bony shells. Others had razor-sharp teeth. As a result, some weaker fish escaped the ocean to survive. Other creatures left it to get food, or out of curiosity. And so, according to the theory of evolution, in the next millions of years, these fish began to grow limbs and hair and climb trees. And you know what happened next. And now, let's imagine that nothing forced fish to go to dry land. What if the ocean wasn't so dangerous, and there were a lot of algae and phytoplankton, and fewer ancient and giant sharks? There's food and there are no enemies. Why would fish need to leave this place and spend a couple 100 million years growing limbs? Fish could chill and hang out in the water. Some reached the surface, but they didn't like it there. Strong winds, lightning flashes, it all looked unfriendly. Millions of years passed, and fish were still around. More dangerous sea inhabitants appeared, but fish just grew longer fins to swim faster. Other fish grew plates on their tails to fend off enemies. But in general, most fish still look the same as they did millions of years ago. Their brains were developing. They learned how to communicate with one another using echolocation and movements of tails and fins. All day long, fish swam, looked for food, multiplied, and hung out together. It made no sense for them to evolve. And now, let's take a look at the history of humans. So, fish came to land and grew limbs. Then the struggle for survival began. Some creatures became carnivores. Others turned into herbivores. Some ate grass, and others noticed ripe fruit on trees. These crawling creatures started reaching for fruit. After millions of years of such attempts, the creatures' limbs began to grow longer. They stood on their back legs and finally became upright. These ancient animals, the ancestors of primates, learned to climb trees to get more fruit. Then some of them started using stones to crack nutshells. Others began to throw sticks into branches to knock down ancient apples. The more these animals interacted with the environment, the more their brains developed. In addition to saber-toothed tigers and other ancient monsters that tried to eat primates, there were also bad weather conditions that caused a lot of problems. Ancient apes began to hide in caves and even create shelters from branches and leaves. Then someone accidentally started a fire, and it changed the rules of the game. New neuron connections opened up in the brain, and it led to abstract thinking. People built bonfires in caves and watched flames cast shadows on the walls. Images began to form in their heads. The ancestors of people began to make drawings. And so, step by step, over millions of years, they evolved into Homo sapiens. Of course, no one knows precisely how it was, but let's assume that evolution worked this way. The struggle for survival formed the human brain. And now, let's go back to the ocean, where fish swim. They can move from side to side, up and down, and they don't need to reach any branches and fruit. Food is floating everywhere around them. Fish are cold-blooded, so they don't freeze. They don't need to hide from the rain or anything else, so they don't need to build roofs and shelters and start a fire. But still, something changes in their minds. Fish often swim to the surface to see this bright light from the sun. Through the clear water, they see the starry sky and the bright moon. And of course, these pictures form new neural connections in their brains. Fish are curious, and they think about how to explore the land. Their gill-based respiratory system doesn't allow them to be out of the water for a long time. Fish begin to contemplate this world. Over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, they learn to communicate with one another and begin to understand how the cycle of life in the ocean works. Some fish form large colonies and build houses inside coral reefs. But these houses look like big anthills, not like buildings. Fish stay there to hide from enemies and to have rest. Also, fish meet other enemies, birds. Gulls and pelicans catch lunch when fish rise close to the surface. Small fish decide never to swim there and create a law forbidding them from approaching the surface. The appearance of this unspoken statute forms society. Some fish train to fend off seagulls. Fish hold sharp stones, pieces of coral, or shells in their teeth. And when gulls catch them, these fish hit the bird's feet with corals. Also, fish manage to catch their winged enemies. When some seagull dives under the water, fish attack it from all sides. They do this to study the seagull's body and understand how it can fly and breathe on the surface. Fish become wise creatures, like highly developed dolphins. They understand more and more about the planet, but don't strive to get out of the water because there's no need for it. But then, they discover something creepy. Fish swim toward the shore and see how big bald creatures without scales, with smooth skin, arms, and legs, dive into the water. Fish swim closer to get to know them, but these creatures catch them with their webbed hands. Now fish have another more dangerous enemy, the sea people. They are intelligent, cruel, and strong. To understand these creatures, let's go back to the real world and look at seals, dolphins, whales, and walruses. All these animals are mammals, which means warm blood flows in them. But why are they so different from fish? Seals and sea lions have the same ancestor as dogs. Manatees and elephants have common origins. Whales and dolphins are marine versions of hippos and hoofed animals. Hundreds of millions of years ago, The ancestors of all these mammals were cold-blooded fish. They got out of the ocean and began to explore the land. Their bodies started to change, and their blood temperature rose. But some of these animals decided not to go far from the water. Those that left the ocean became dogs, bears, and elephants. And those who stayed close to the oceans and seas became mammals adapted to the water. They didn't explore the land for various reasons. Some animals hid in the water from land enemies. Perhaps some couldn't spend a long time under the scorching sun. They transformed into animals with fins. They don't have gills, but can hold their breath underwater for a few minutes. And now, imagine if primates living in trees moved to the shore. Their skin would lose its fur, webbing would grow on their fingers, and their whole body would get covered with a thick layer of fat. They would develop intelligence and become sea people. Each of them would weigh as much as a polar bear because of subcutaneous fat. The fact is that all marine mammals need a lot of fat to protect their body from the cold. A large amount of fat makes them mobile and fast in the water. Now, intelligent, peaceful fish have to fight with cruel sea people. But who will win in this conflict? I think we need another video to find out.
You run through the night forest for more than an hour. You're even faster than a cheetah. You're not tired or cold. You hear a mouse rustling in the roots of a tree and catch all the smells of the forest. With night vision, you see a bird in the night sky. You can go for months without food or water. Gills allow you to swim underwater freely. This is how evolution made humans in a parallel world. Here, they're ideal organisms prepared for anything they might meet in the wild. In our world, things are more complicated. We evolved, but didn't always get stronger. Humans only survived because they adapted and changed the world around them. A human only has 32 teeth. When they fall out, they no longer grow. But evolution doesn't stop. Our food has become softer and more nutritious. You don't need to chew it for a long time. New diet reduced the jaw and enlarged the brain. As a result, there's no room left for the 4 teeth that are closest to the joint. We call them wisdom teeth. In the future, we'll only have 28 teeth. And even today, 35% of people don't have the wisdom teeth. Homo sapiens is the only mammal to have a chin. This is the protrusion along the lower edge of the jawbone. Even our relatives, gorillas and chimpanzees, have their jaws slanted inward. Anthropologists think that the chin is a result of reduction of human face. Perhaps in the past, the chin supported our powerful jaw and enhanced our strength. Over millions of years, the face has shrunk, but the chin has remained. Put your hand on a flat surface, connect your ring finger and thumb, bend your wrist, and you'll see the palmaris longus. 15% of people don't have this muscle already. It doesn't affect the grip strength and has lost its meaning today. Millions of years ago, it allowed our ancestors to deftly climb trees. Evolution deprived us of this useful skill, but the remainder of it remained with us. Dogs, horses, monkeys, and many other animals can move their ears. This allows them to hear better and communicate with each other. Humans have a long, flexible neck, and evolution has left them without this ability. Still, 20% of modern humans can do it. This is another reminder of a time when we weren't much different from other animals. 10% of people have a Darwin's tubercle in their ear. In the past, we had pointy ears looking like the modern macaw's ones, and this little bump is the proof. When an emperor penguin hatches eggs, it doesn't eat for 115 days. Scorpions can stay hungry for a whole year. Evolution hasn't given humans a camel-like hump of fat or the ability to hibernate like a bear. Every morning, our ancestors woke up and fought for their survival. We need a lot of energy for this, so we have to eat every day. This isn't very convenient, especially when your food isn't sold in the supermarket but runs away from you through the forest or field. In the human brain, at any given moment, 100 billion neurons work. Thanks to this, you have a good memory and can talk. This is essential for survival. A big brain has a flaw. For neurons to work, it needs a lot of fuel. It makes up just 2.5% of body weight, but consumes 20% of its energy. In 2 hours of playing chess, a grand master burns 560 calories. A professional tennis player will spend the same amount of energy in a single hour. Big brains make us weak. Even a small chimp is much stronger than a human. Why do you need muscles if you no longer swing from branches? But you need a big brain to negotiate and cooperate with other people. Got weaker, and we like lying on the couch more and more. This is a comfortable position for thinking. At night, our ancestors were especially vulnerable. When you sleep in a new place, the left side of your brain is more awake than the right one. This brain reaction is called the first night effect. This is an ancient reaction of the body to the dangers that awaited a human in the dark. 40 to 60 million years ago, evolution gave us yet another fear. We're born with the fear of being bitten by a snake or spider. Apparently, these animals were the main danger to the first primates. Anthropologists say we became runners 2 million years ago. Broad shoulders make it convenient to swing your arms and keep balance. A special ligament extends from the spine to the back of the head. It stabilizes the head while running. No primate has strong gluteal muscles. They only turn on to full power when you're running. Hairless and 3 million sweat glands keep our bodies from overheating. People are perfect runners, but evolution has made us slow. You'll never overtake a chimp on a short distance, and that's not mentioning cheetahs. They accelerate to an incredible 70 miles per hour. But almost all land animals are sprinters and don't run for more than 10 to 15 minutes. Humans are adapted for long distances. Walking 2 legs helped our ancestors solve many problems. They freed their hands to carry food or tools. 2 legs and a straight back made our ancestors larger and even scarier for other animals. When you stand on 2 legs, you'll quickly see a saber-toothed tiger, which is waiting for you in the tall grass of the plains or the African savanna. Your body weight is distributed over only 2 limbs, and this has consequences. You can calmly walk down the street, stumble, and get injured over that. Consider this our payment for upright walking. So why do we need toes? Certainly not to hit them on the furniture. When our ancestors lived in the trees, toes helped them cling to branches. Imagine you can work at the computer, draw pictures, or cook scrambled eggs, all with your feet. Cool, but good old evolution has deprived us of this skill. Today, we're not sitting in the trees, but our feet remain flexible. Come to think of it, hooves would be more suitable for us. They're durable and don't need shoes. But until we evolve again, our feet remain fragile. Either of them has 26 bones. This doesn't make our walking or running any safer. You go to the cinema, take your popcorn basket, and start munching on it in anticipation of a great couple of hours. But then you start choking. Those few minutes of coughing and involuntary tears seem to last forever. The human is the only mammal that can choke on its food. We can't eat and breathe at the same time. The reason for this is the structure of our vocal apparatus. Your larynx is down below, thanks to which you can talk, but not while eating. Goosebumps, horripilation, gooseflesh, these are the names of the reflex that makes your skin not smooth but bumpy. This happens when you're cold or scared. Greetings from the Stone Age. Our ancestors were covered in thick hair. When they got scared, the hair follicles rose. This made them large and menacing for other animals. This natural reaction warmed the body as the air grew colder. The body of modern people no longer has long and thick hair. But if that movie is really scary, or you forgot your jacket in the evening, goosebumps still appear. Bears, hedgehogs, bats, some turtles, fish, and insects. All these creatures have one thing in common: they hibernate. Scientists claim that our ancestors were also on this list. In a cave in the north of Spain, researchers found fossilized bones of ancient people. The analysis showed that 500,000 years ago, humans could spend several months hibernating, similar to bears. Thanks to this, they survived Ice Age. Wow, how I miss this skill. Our eyes allow us to see dust in the air and huge mountains on the horizon. We see the world in color and recognize each other's faces. And when it gets darker, our vision quickly adapts to new conditions. But we don't see well in the dark. Evolution hasn't given us the sight of a tarsier. This primate is the size of a baseball and can see perfectly in the dark.
Tarsiers could easily catch a beetle flying through the night forest. Still, I wouldn't want my eyes to take up most of my face, and beetles are